Welcome to the Sherdog Radio Network preview for UFC Fight Night 255, Edwards vs. Brady, also known as UFC London. I'm your host, Ben Duffy of Sherdog.com. With me, as usual, is Keith Schillen, the executive producer of the Sherdog Radio Network. Keith, how you doing today?
I'm doing good, man. I got my green on. As most people who are watching this today, it will be St. Patrick's Day, so happy St. Patrick's Day to all of them. Even though I think it's a really crappy holiday, but we can get to that a little bit. How's you doing, man?
Hey, you are from, I would say the greater Boston area.
Yep.
I'm American of Irish extraction, as is obvious from my last name. I got like the shamrock and gold coins up behind me, but yeah, I think it's kind of a corny holiday too. And the funny thing is, every actual Irish person I've talked to has just always been like, oh, you Americans make a much bigger deal out of it than we do.
Well, they shouldn't, because if you know the story of St. Patrick, he wasn't even Irish. He was English. And the Irish are the bad guys. And it's true, though. And the Irish are the bad guys in the story. Listen. Here's some story time with Keith. So my grandmother was from England, so my mom's mom, so she'd always talk about like how stupid St. Patrick's Day was, and so St. Patrick was he was enslaved by the Irish, and then when he broke free, he came back years later as a holy man, and he preaching the gospel. At that time, they were a pagan country, and he turned into a Christian country. So when he driven out the snakes, it's not physical snakes. It was supposed to be like a symbol for paganism. So that's why he's the patron saint of Ireland.
There you go, folks.
But my favorite thing is, regardless of whether he was Irish or whatever, but all right, he was I don't know. He went to Ireland and spent a long time there. But think about what we're doing. Like, hey, there's some holy guy from I don't know, hundreds of years ago. Let's celebrate him by getting like slammed drunk. Like, how stupid. That'd be like, Ben, that'd be like, hey, it's Mother Teresa's birthday. Let's go freaking snort some coke. Like, what are we doing?
On the one hand, that makes me want to find out when Mother Teresa's birthday is and start a new tradition. But
yeah, Billy Graham's birthday's coming up. Like, let's do some fentanyl. Like, what are we doing? Like, it's stupid, Harlan. But anyways, hey.
Anyway. So yeah, as we record,
green's an ugly color.
What's that?
Plus, green's an ugly color.
If you're enjoying this on a podcast platform instead of YouTube, you are missing out on Keith filling up your screen with some green, by the way. And I got a little going in the background. So we're looking at UFC London, 13 fight card. The main event changed not last minute. By the time they step into the cage, Sean Brady and Leon Edwards will have had 6 or 7 weeks to prepare for each other. Give me your overall thoughts on this card. How good is it?
I think it's good. I'd give it like a B. Like it's a strong. I mean, the main event's awesome. The co-main event's awesome. There's some good quality guys up and down the card. Could grade it for a show, going into an arena and everything with a live crowd. I still think it's a pretty good one.
Yeah, I'm with you. And the arena factor is worth mentioning here, because when we talk about these cards in advance, say how good they are on paper, obviously we're talking about, divisional relevance. Are there any people on this card that are at least close to a title shot if we're talking about a regular cable card? Are there some fights down the card that are likely to give us some exciting fights, some highlights? And then there's just the actual arena factor. There are 13 fights on this card. 11 of the 13 have an either UK or Ireland-based fighter. If you're willing to stipulate that Gunnar Nelson effectively counts as Irish at this point, he's been at SBG Ireland longer than any active fighter. He counts. Like, they only dust him off for the UK cards now. Then 11 out of the 13 fights have at least one British, English, Scottish, Irish fighter, and only one fight has, I think there may be only one fight that has two. So there's an obvious rooting interest. The British crowd is famously, you ask anybody connected with the UFC, and even just bluster aside, they'll all say, the London crowd, any crowd in England is just absolutely bananas for the UFC. So
that's because they've been drinking all week celebrating their guy St. Patrick.
Judging from the past events there, I don't think they need any particular calendar-based excuse to get lit for these events. Outside of, say, the main event, what's your most anticipated fight on this card?
Well, that's a tough one.
Or most anticipated fighter, if it's not just.
Oh, that's a tough one. I'm gonna go with Nathaniel Wood, Morgan Charriere fight. I think that's a really good one.
I agree. That's a really good one. There are, let's see, 4 or 5. There are 7.
Fernandes, Kutateladze. That's another one I really like.
Yeah, and that, at least as of right now, is scheduled as the curtain jerker, and that one should be a banger. That is one of only 2 fights on the card, in fact, that have no British or Irish fighters on them. The other one being the co-main event, Blachowicz versus Ulberg. But yeah, I like Wood versus Charriere. I think Jordan Vucenic versus Chris Duncan should be a lot of fun for as long as it lasts. Yeah, this one looks like good old O2 Arena banger fight night card to me.
Yeah, I think it's a good one.
Any other general thoughts on this one before we dive into these prelims?
Real quick, apologize for the no recap for the Litzy Vittori card. Ben was off. I was going to do it with Dev. I got called in something really serious at work, so that's why.
Ben called for the Carlos Vera.
Oh yes,
Musasa upset.
Yes,
at plus 425, and so my head would not fit through the door of my office, so I couldn't get even to join the recap. My head had grown so large that I was stuck in a doorway.
Yes, great, good. That was a fantastic. And I was dogging you for calling it. That was a great call, dude. That Mufasa went down like he was hanging off a cliff, and Scar was holding him. The way he went down from that high kick,
the whole herd of wildebeest just ran his ass over.
That's it.
Outstanding. The UFC London prelims kick off with a lightweight contest between Guram Kutateladze and Kaue Fernandes. Kutateladze, the 33-year-old Georgian, is 13-4 overall. He's 2-2 in the UFC, and he is coming in off a win. He fought just once last year. It was at UFC on ABC, Sandhagen versus Nurmagomedov in August, where he took a unanimous decision over the then debuting Jordan Vucenic, who appears a little further up this card. He will look to make it 2 in a row, get himself above 500 in the UFC against Fernandes, who'll be looking to do the exact same thing. 30-year-old Brazilian is 9-2 overall. He is 1-1 in the UFC. He fought just once last year as well. It was at the same exact card in August, where he knocked out Muhammad Yahya late in the first round, evening up his UFC record. Both gentlemen looking to start up a win streak, both looking to get above 500 in the promotion. Kutateladze is favored to get it done, to say the least. He is, I believe, the biggest favorite on the entire card at minus 450. Fernandes coming in at plus 350 the other way. 2 guys over 30, 2 guys at 500 in the UFC. This is one of the deeper and more competitive divisions in the entire organization. Do you see any particular sparkle or upside in either of these guys, and who do you think gets it done?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of like both guys. I think this is a really, really, really fun fight to start. I mean, we have, Kutateladze, who's had brilliant moments so far in the UFC. Or I shouldn't say brilliant, but like flashes of moments, and then Fernandes, I mean, he's got a good record. He's had some good showing. So, I don't think a card gets done any better than this. I mean, this is like, you know what this is like? I don't know. You start your day off right. And what's the best way to start your day off? It's like you don't get out of bed. You have nothing to go. Somebody else is in bed with you. Yeah. You pitch a tent. You know what I mean? And
yes.
That's all. This one's a banger to start off the card. I mean, Kutateladze, I mean, I've liked this guy a lot. I mean, he's a really good athlete, nice footwork. He marches down his foe, pressure in from the get go. He's setting up his shots well with feints. He used a lot of what I like about him. He used a lot of up and down feints, but you don't see too much. But it works really well because of his wrestling ability. He's a good striker. He attacks with combinations. He likes to work the body well. He mixes punches and kicks together well. Nice knees inside, especially from like the Muay Thai plum clench. I love that he'll get inside and start looking for like slicing elbows. He's got some good pop in his hands. He's got 7 TKOs. I love his kicking game. Great kicks to the body. I love his high kick. I love his calf kicks. And dude's a wicked good wrestler. I mean, good quick entries, good at creating a scramble and winning them. If you try to take him down, he's really hard to take down. If you take him down, I don't know if it's the best thing. I mean, he's a European Abu Dhabi champion. He's got some great back takes. He's attacking subs from every position, even off his back. He showed against Gamera and Ismagulov. If you take him down, he's very hard to hold down. Cardio has been an issue. It kind of fades, and durability has been a little bit of an issue. Like those are the two glaring weaknesses on him, but the talent is there. Now, Fernandes, he moves really well. He's got good footwork. He's a very aggressive striker. He's got some nice power, great calf kicks. He had a fantastic high kick KO in the LFA. Defensively, that's a little worse. And he keeps his chin high in the air. He lacks head movement. He can wrestle, not the ability of Kutateladze, but he can wrestle a little bit. He looks for upper body takedowns. If he gets the fight to the ground, he's looking to advance position on the ground. He is a BJJ black belt. I've even seen him pull guard before, which I don't think would be a wise decision. He's not the best defensive wrestler, and he needs to improve his get-up game, but he can get submissions even off his back. He got 2 submissions in his career, and his one loss he gassed out on. So that's kind of concerning. Both guys have faded, so that might be something to watch. I kind of like both guys. But I mean, I've kind of been the president of the Kutateladze fan club, so I think he's better than Fernandes everywhere. I say he batters Fernandes with kicks. I think he then shoots, takes Fernandes down, beats him up on the ground. I think he's a really good submission artist. I think he eventually locks in a submission. I says he does it in the second round. Give me Kutateladze a second round sub.
Yeah. When I first started kind of looking at this fight, researching these guys, I was surprised at the line. My thought was, well, Kutateladze is really good. But Fernandes is pretty good too. I'm surprised that he is a plus 350 underdog, but I came to a pretty similar conclusion to the one that you seem to have come to, in that this is kind of quietly a bad style matchup for Fernandes. Like the things that he is good at, Kutateladze is either better at or good at neutralizing. In response to listener demand, based on a comment on last week's preview, I'm going to refer to the taller fighter in all 13 of these fights as long and lengthy. So
that guy got me good. He got me good.
And
hey, long and lengthy is what they call me when I start the day the way I do. We start the day revving the engine, you know what I mean?
Yeah. And Kutateladze has a similar thing to Tony Ferguson in that he comes across as a taller fighter with greater reach than he has. Just I think because of the way opponents react to him. He's moving forward. He's using a lot of feints, including level feints. His stance is kind of like shoulders up, like the orangutan type stance. Kutateladze has a little bit of that as well. It's fun to watch when he is forced into when he's forced into wrestling and grappling sequences. He's a guy that, for better or worse, nabbed a top 10-ish fighter, Mateusz Gamrot, in his UFC debut. And because of that, this guy's going to get matched hard forever. It took back-to-back losses to get him back down to kind of where he can develop like the 30-something pseudo prospect he is. But here, Fernandez's best routes to victory involve him either catching Kutateladze with a big shot. Like he might be a harder hitter on a single shot for single shot basis, but I'm not picking that to happen. I think Kutateladze is going to, I don't think he's going to give Fernandes much chance to get comfortable on the feet. If he doesn't like what he's getting there, just he can turn to the wrestling and grappling so seamlessly, so quickly. And Fernandes knowing that is, I think, going to blunt his striking a little bit as well. You mentioned the kind of up and down level feints that Kutateladze has. And again, kind of like the Tony Ferguson thing, those kind of feints get people biting because he likes tall man, like ankle pick type takedowns. So give me Kutateladze I could see him getting the submission, kind of like you picked. I'm going to pick this to go the distance, but Kutateladze probably to win all 3 rounds. Or if he happens to drop the 3rd round, it's one where both guys are really tired and Fernandes just happens to have a couple moments of superior offense. But yeah, give me Kutateladze to win at least 2 rounds out of 3 here in pretty uncontroversial fashion. We head to the men's bantamweight division next as Nathan Fletcher takes on Caolan Loughran. Fletcher, the 27-year-old Liverpool native, is 9-1 overall. He's 1-0 since joining the UFC as a bantamweight standout and former title challenger in Cage Warriors. He made his UFC debut at UFC Fight Night Burns versus Brady last September, where he picked up a 2nd-round submission of Zigomanis Ramashka. He will look to make it 2 in a row against Loughran. Loughran, 28-year-old Irishman, is 9-2 overall. He is 1-2 since joining the UFC as the outgoing Cage Warriors bantamweight champ. He debuted with a decision loss to Taylor Lopoulos, bounced back with a decision win over Angel Pacheco, and then in his most recent appearance at UFC 304 last July, he dropped a unanimous decision to Jake Hadley. So he has alternated losses and wins throughout his UFC run. He will look to get back in the win column here. There are a number of close lines on this card, Keith, so I'll throw a few out there for your guesswork. Your favorite here is -140. Your underdog +110. Who are they?
Oh, I'm glad that this line is really close. I'll say Loughran. No. Yeah, Loughran's the favorite.
You would have been right to flip. Nathan Fletcher -140. Caolan Loughran +110.
Okay, that's how I expected it, though. All right. Like close like that.
This is the only fight on the entire card featuring 2 British fighters or a British and an Irish fighter against each other. Who gets it done here?
2 guys want to get the fight to the ground. I want to say something. I forgot. I should have said this from the top. The NCAA Division III wrestling tournament was actually right here in Providence this weekend. I want to give a shout out to 2 special guys. They're both of my son's wrestling coaches, or they have coached them in the past. First is Josiah Fry, who just won his 3rd straight NCAA tournament. He's national championship 3rd time in a row, finishes his college career. So give a special shout out to him. And the other one, Hayden Brown, he's a senior, just finished his career winning the NCAA tournament. He was one of my son's first wrestling coaches, both fantastic guys. So congratulations to those 2 guys. I'll start with Fletcher. He's a southpaw. I see he's an okay striker. He marches forward, throws like a 1-2. But everything he does, he's a grappler. He wants to get the fight to the ground. He throws big haymakers and he likes to follow right into it, like his patent like single leg takedown. He isn't really an explosive wrestler. I mean, he ain't beating the 2 guys I just mentioned in a wrestling match, that's for sure. He likes body lock takedowns. More of a scrambler, more of a funk wrestler. I like the hits like Granbys and peek outs and drags and stuff. So he's kind of fun in that. He looks to advanced position when he gets the fight to the ground. He does need to improve his control. He was swept by Ramoski twice in that fight. He has a submission artist. He's got 7 subs on his record. And he can get some subs off his back. Loughran, he's a real poor athlete. He's short. He's stocky. He tries to kind of make up for his height with his strength. He isn't a very technical striker, very stiff on his feet, constantly moving forward, but doesn't kind of match the movement with the volume of strikes, which is kind of weird. He works behind a jab to get to the pocket. He likes to throw it out of the pocket. He does throw some hard hooks. Likes to wrap his overhand right around his opponent's jab. He has some power, though he will pull his punches a little bit. He has a big kicking game. He's got a lot of defensive issues. He lacks head movement. He just keeps his chin high. He likes to wrestle, but I think his wrestling is grossly overrated. It has not impressed me yet. He does have pretty good takedown defense, though. This is a hard fight to pick because I'm kind of low on both of them. Both are bad athletes. I think both are weak on the feet. If it stays mostly on the feet, if we get like two grapplers with a standing matchup, I think Loughran, because he has a power advantage and he has more of a volume. Actually, I don't know if he has more volume. He definitely has a power advantage. I'd give him that. I really think this is a toss up, but I mean, Loughran he had a couple peak outs, which is really fun to see. I like peak outs. I think we get a lot of grappling. I think Loughran's going to get the slight edge there because I think he'll initiate the entries. I'm really on the fence, but I'm going to say Loughran wins a split decision.
I get it right away why you aren't super high on either of these guys. Just for one thing, it's men's bantamweight. It's people that make.
You know what? I think I said. I'm sorry. I think I said Loughran by split. I'm sorry. I meant to say I'm going Fletcher by split decision.
Oh, I thought we were going to have some disagreement there, because I thought you were going Loughran, but
no, I think I misspoke. I wrote down Loughran in my notes, but I meant to put Fletcher.
No, I'm. Spoiler, I'm leaning Fletcher as well, but when you're looking for upside in a couple of 20-something up-and-comers in the bantamweight division, typically there's going to be a little more athleticism than this and a little more either well-roundedness and polish, or at least just neither of these guys is Muhammad Dvalishvili. Like, is I guess the way I'm trying to put this. This one really could go either way. I agree that Loughran is the harder hitter of the two on a shot for shot basis, and the way both these guys kind of come in swinging, if this turns into a battle between two grapplers where they just kind of neutralize each other and we end up with 3 rounds of sloppy kickboxing on the feet, Loughran's never going to throw more strikes in a round than Fletcher, probably, but he's more capable of landing the one strike that wins a round for him. I'm glad the line is close. I'm leaning Fletcher here as well. Yeah, give me Fletcher by decision. But yeah, if Loughran wins it just by hitting Fletcher hard a couple of times and squeaking out close rounds that way, that wouldn't shock me either. Strawweights take the cage next at UFC London as Shauna Bannon faces off against Puja Tomar. Bannon, the 31-year-old Irish woman, is 6-1 overall. She's 1-1 since joining the UFC a little over a year and a half ago. After dropping a decision to Bruna Brazil in her promotional debut, she came back last July at UFC 304 and won a split decision over late replacement Alice Ardeleon. She'll look to make it 2 wins in a row in the UFC at the expense of Tomar, who is looking to do the same. 31-year-old from India is 9-4 overall. She's 1-0 in the UFC. She made her promotional debut at UFC on ESPN Cannonier versus Imavov last June, where she picked up a controversial split decision over Rayani Amanda dos Santos. Odds on this one do favor Bannon. She is -180. Tomar is +150 coming back. You mentioned in our preview of the Fletcher versus Loughran men's bantamweight fight, you weren't super high on either gentleman. No. I would say the same about this fight.
You'd have to be high to like these two.
But here's the thing. Neither of these women looks like a future contender to me, but one of them looks like somebody who could hang around the UFC for another 4 or 5 years, kind of trading off wins and losses, where one does not look like UFC material at all.
Okay.
Like, Shauna Bannon, she comes from a striking background. She comes from, at least by the standards of Ireland, striking royalty per She has, like, I think a parent and some siblings that were, karate champs in.
I think you say she's related to Connor.
Oh no, I wouldn't dare to venture a guess, but
I mean, the best strikers from Ireland is Connor and the Irish guy in Braveheart.
The insane one. That guy was awesome.
Yeah, that guy's awesome. Which no, when you say insane one, you're talking about Braveheart or Connor? They're both pretty insane.
They are pretty insane, but the guy in Braveheart was crazy from the first time he stepped on screen, whereas Connor, we got to kind of watch him lose his shit over the course of several years. So Bannon, I mean, she comes from a point karate background. You can see some of it in her striking, but honestly, it doesn't scream former karateka to the extent of some other karate-based fighters in the UFC. Hell, Gunnar Nelson's fighting third from the top on this card. He looks more like a converted karate fighter than just about anybody, that's been in the promotion in the last decade. Bannon's problem is, like, she's not much of an athlete, and while she has a long background in striking, her MMA journey is relatively short. So on the local scene in Europe as well as in the UFC, she kind of presents as a medium volume, low power striker who has trouble dictating the distance against fighters who just want to crash the pocket and get inside against her. Alice Ardeleon made their fight ugly. I mean, Bannon ended up winning the decision, but it was a nip and tuck thing against someone who probably doesn't belong in the UFC at all. So Bannon's wins and losses are going to be highly dependent on matchmaking. Opponents who do any one thing at even a moderate UFC strawweight level and have the fight IQ, the wherewithal to press that advantage are going to beat Bannon. The people that won't beat Bannon are the people who either just sit back and concede a Shauna Bannon fight, kind of a distance striking match that Bannon can win, or ones that don't do anything at a UFC level. Puja Tomar does not do anything at a UFC level. For one, I believe she is the shortest fighter in UFC history. Like, she is an atomweight through and through, and wouldn't even be that good in atomweight. Like, she is a come forward slugger who lands with a certain amount of power just because she swings hard on things. She likes to bring fights to the ground when she can, but she's not really much of a technical wrestler. And while she was a better athlete and just had more physical horsepower than some of the overwhelmed women she was fighting in India and in one championship, it's just not going to work on any UFC strawweights. Her fight against Rayani Amanda was terrible, and she shouldn't have won. Like, Rayani Dos Santos won that fight. I guess I'm glad Tomar has a win in the UFC under her belt, but she's not getting past Bannon here. This is someone who is actually kind of tailor-made for Bannon to shine, because Tomar is probably going to come straight at her, a much shorter woman, swinging big loopy punches, throwing out the occasional kick. If Bannon can't stick and move against Puja Tomar, can't keep Puja from taking her down, or at least getting her hands on her and just kind of stifling everything, then she really doesn't belong in the UFC. But I'm picking Bannon to be able to get that done in at least 2 rounds out of 3. Give me Shauna Bannon to win by decision here in a fight that does not really do much for either woman's stock, but the O2 Arena will erupt.
Oh, this fight. Good Lord. I like what you said. oh, one of these girls can hang, and you had this like long pole. Instead, I think I say like from a stripper pole, maybe. I was. You talked about Bannon. Tomar is the person that can make the only thing that can make Bannon shine, and I'm like, well, except for that freaking platinum hair, though, that'll make her shine. Holy moly! I mean, her hair dye might weigh more than Puja Tomar.
Her tan might weigh more than Puja Tomar.
Oh, this. So yeah, Bannon has this long Taekwondo history, and it always reminds. It's so funny because the way she looked, it looks like the girl I'm about to talk about too. She looked the same way. This girl was a girl I dated when I think I was in like 10th grade maybe, and she was into like Kempo karate, and I remember going to her like one of her tournaments or something. Ooh. I was sitting in the stands like trying to be a good boyfriend and watching, and like I don't know if I told you this story before. I feel like I have. Like the white belts go out, and they're like, it's like the ugliest fighting I've ever seen. I'm like, oh yeah, of course the white belts. I'm like, oh. And then like I don't know what the next color up. It was like yellow belts or something. Doing it, and then I'm like, oh, but when it gets to like the black belts, like that's where I'm gonna see some cool like fucking Jean-Claude Van Damme shit spinning. Like they got to the black belt, they look the same thing as the white belts. I'm sitting there, I'm like, I'm peak wrestling. I'm sitting there, and I'm like, I think I was like, maybe I'm a junior. I'm like, I could fuck up everybody in this arena.
Without shooting a takedown.
I'm like, no. And I'm like, yeah, takedown. Holy moly. Anyways, it's probably not true. I probably would have got. The worst is when they start doing their like dance routines. Oh my lord. They had. She had one where like she's getting attacked by like 4 dudes, and she like backhands this guy, but of course the other guy, he doesn't attack when she turns her back to her and hits this guy. She has to wait exactly when she's done hitting this guy. Now he's gonna attack, and he's gonna throw like, I'm like, oh, I'm sitting there like, people actually believe this shit works. Anyways, but that girl, last time I seen her, she looked like she ate a white belt. So but she probably could kick these 2 girls' ass, though, to her credit. Bannon, I mean, she fights out of both stances. For a girl who comes from a traditional martial arts background, she doesn't move that much. Her striking is nothing special. I mean, she lacks power because she throws nothing but arm punches. She overextends on her shots, almost jumps at her opponents instead of keeping her base underneath her. She'll do the same combination over and over again. She does have a big kicking game. She loves body kicks from the southpaw stance. She has a good hike. She leads with kicks and then follows with punches, which is something we don't see a lot. She likes to close the distance or work in the clinch. She'll look for like inside trips, but I still wouldn't call her a wrestler, and she's a weak defensive wrestler. Like, if she gets on top, I like her ground pound, but she's not a submission threat at all, and she does have good cardio. Tomar, she's southpaw. I think I'm a little higher on her than you. She's a good athlete, though. She's fairly fast, fairly explosive, but not very technical, very raw. She can be very wild. She does step into her shots. She has nice power. She has 6 TKOs, but as you mentioned, she fought some low-level people. She mixes punches and kicks together well. I like her kicking game. I mean, she's got a good dexterity in her kicks. She throws hard kicks. She got a good high kick, which is probably someone's belly button based on her height. Some good calf kicks. She likes that like Holly Holm push kick. I mean, she broke an opponent's arm once, but just by them blocking her kick. Which is funny because she has good kicks, but then she also throw them naked. She has a mean kicking game, but if you can get past her kicks, there isn't much else. She can use her physical strength well in the clinch, and she showed improved takedown against Rayona Amanda, but she has no submission wins. She's been subbed 3 times herself. I'm not high in either. I'm going the opposite. I'm going to take Tomar. I think she's the better athlete. I think her kicks are more dangerous. Bannon should crowd the kicker, and if she does that, she gets in the pocket. I really think she'd have her way. That's just not her game. I think she likes to stay on the outside a little bit. I'll say Tomar wins a split decision.
Next up at UFC Fight Night 255 is the first of 2 Chris Duncan's on the card. This one, the middleweight Christian Leroy Duncan, welcoming Andrey Pulyaev to the UFC. Duncan, the 29-year-old Brit, is 10-2 overall. He's 3-2 since joining the UFC as the then undefeated outgoing Cage Warriors middleweight champ. He is coming in off a loss. He fought most recently at UFC 304 in London last July, where he dropped a unanimous decision to Gregory Rodriguez. That snapped a 2-fight win streak for him over Dennis Chilulan and Claudio Ribeiro. He will look to get back in the win column here against the debuting Pulyaev. 27-year-old Russian is 9-2 overall. He fought on the Contender Series last August, taking a unanimous decision over Liam Anderson. I said earlier on the show that Guram Kutateladze is the biggest favorite on the card. I was incorrect. Biggest favorite on the card would be Christian Leroy Duncan, who comes in at minus 650, Pulyaev plus 475 coming back. I'll say this much. Stylistically, in terms of what both guys are good at, what they want to do in the cage based on the body of work we have to observe, based on the level of competition they've been fighting, on their natural physical gifts, I have no problem at all with Christian Leroy Duncan being a minus 600, minus 650 favorite over Andrey Pulyaev. He is a fantastic athlete who wants a similar kind of fight, but has proven his ability to prosecute that type of fight against a much higher level of competition than Pulyaev. I have no problem with that at all. But Duncan is turned into one of those guys that I don't absolutely trust necessarily to win fights that he should. And thus far in the UFC, he's, beaten a couple of middleweights. He's lost to one very good one and then one decent one in a fight that he could have, should have won. No, there's no shame in losing to Gregory Rodriguez. Rodriguez is a top 10 talent with some consistency problems himself, but Duncan had an opponent in Armen Petrosyan that, kind of like I'm about to say about Pulyaev, is a guy who on paper wants the same kind of fight Duncan does, and Duncan on paper should be better at that kind of fight, and just struggled to win rounds, struggled to make the fight his. That's what concerns me about him as a massive favorite over Pulyaev. Pulyaev, he's Russian, and he is a striker by preference. But for a guy that is an Alexander Shlemenko protege, has trained with him for basically his whole career, most of his regional fights were in Shlemenko's promotion, the similarities end there. If you don't even have to be that old school to know Alexander Shlemenko, but if you're old school enough to remember his fights, in Bellator, in M1, he is a short, stocky, insane Russian guy who
he almost got in a fight with me at Mohegan Sun.
Okay.
But I asked him about he was fighting Musasi, and Musasi went on this big rant about his steroid use. So I asked him about it, and he just gave me this freaking death stare like you wouldn't believe. But and then this one guy's like, dude, I can't believe you. And they didn't have it wasn't behind a podium. It was standing, he'd stand there with all around him, kind of like almost in front of the locker. And Mohegan Sun it's a big casino, but it isn't when you're inside. You'll run to people multiple times. And I think the only thing scarier was his girlfriend or wife who was with him, who had she was very attractive, but Russian death stare look, and she did not appreciate my question. I saw her walking by Krispy Kreme later, and she burned a hole right through me, I was a donut. Just
so that's just picturing him just flying off the handle and throwing a spinning something at you.
And it's pretty ironic. I'm like, are you really that good of fun? You're doing steroids. What do you know about health? And I'm sitting there on my fourth Krispy Kreme donut. dude, hot one right off the belt, dude. There's nothing better. Dude, me and Nolan King from MMA Junkie, that's anytime Mohegan Sun, it's we end every show, go and get the hot ones off the belt. By the way, Krispy Kreme, the newest sponsor of our show.
Please.
No, that couldn't happen. If they sponsored our show, I'd have diabetes by by July 4th.
The format of like our faces on your little YouTube screen would change gradually, like as we just delved further into the partnership. So yeah, if you know anything about Alexander Shlemenko, short, squat, insane Russian who probably his whole career at least one weight class up from his ideal weight class. I mean, when he was staring holes through Keith would be the first to tell you that they're about the same height. Just like this 5'9" middleweight who's a little softer on the middle, and through everything spinning. His nickname was Storm, and it was perfectly applicable. Andrey Pulyaev, about as far from that as you can get while still being an MMA kickboxer. He's very long, rangy. While he's a kickboxer by preference, much more of a bread and butter kickboxer. He looks good against overmatched competition, but even foes that didn't really seem to belong in the same cage or ring with him have just been able to hang around too long. He's a guy that, he's just 27 right now. At middleweight, he has another 5 years to develop, and then several more after that he could continue to perform at a pretty high level. But right now, if he sticks around the UFC, a lot of UFC middleweights are going to be looking at his 6'4" lanky self that has trouble keeping shorter fighters out of his phone booth and just be licking their chops for him. It's like a slightly smoother on the feet Josh Fremd at this point. Duncan should light him up. He has defensive lapses. Keith will probably lay those out in more and better detail than I will. But we were talking about geographic appropriateness playing to the host crowd to a certain extent. Duncan is inconsistent. He's shown us relatively few flashes of the highlight reel that got him to the UFC, but Pulyaev is an opponent pretty much designed to give Duncan every possible chance to get some spectacular head kick knockout. I'm going to pick that, but I could also see Duncan winning a split decision in a miserable fight where even that splitter is kind of a gift. That's Duncan for us. I'm going to take Duncan by first round KO here. And if he gets it, again, I bet it's going to be something spectacular, but disappointment factor, very high potentially on this one.
Oh, am I up? Sorry, I was still dreaming of Krispy Kreme donuts. Sorry. Yeah, obviously that was a joke. I knew you were done. Duncan's, he's massive for the weight class. He's a really good athlete. He moves well. He likes to work from the outside. He's also really good at hand fighting due to his size. He uses it to keep his distance. He hates being pressured, though. He wants his space. He's a solid kickboxer. He's got some good hand speed. He's accurate, a bit of a sniper. He uses feints well to set up his shots. He attacks with combinations. He gets inside. He looks for uppercuts. He has nice power. He does like to land elbows inside, too, when his opponents get too close. The problem is his defense. And he stands up really tall. He keeps his chin high. He was getting hit way too easy by Gregor Rodriguez for my liking. Now, again, Gregor Rodriguez is really good, and he's really come along in his striking. And that's up echelon. This is a big step down in competition, obviously. But you get my point. I like his kicking game. He throws a lot of kicks, a lot of teep kicks. Throws out some spinning attacks, wheel kicks. He showed against Claudio Ribeiro that he can wrestle, and he'll go to it if he needs to. He's got some solid ground and pound. He's hard to take down. He showed against Gregor Rodriguez good submission defense and that's a really good grappler. Pulyaev, he's southpaw. He's a long and lanky guy. He's on the feet, he's got really good output, but he's not a good athlete. He wants to be a technical striker, and using good footwork to kind of keep his distance. But oftentimes he overextends on his shots, kind of leave him there to be countered. He's going to eat a lot of shots to try to win with his volume. Kicks are a big part of his game. He will look to wrestle, but he's not great at it. If he despite being a Russian, if he gets the fight to the ground, he has good ground and pound. But he's a weak defensive wrestler himself. He does have 2 subs on his record, but I've seen him like lose position because he's rushing submissions and not really controlling. I think Duncan has the tools there. But like you can have the tools, you have to know how to use it. My oldest daughter is really she's a character, but she's been trying to get into like some woodworking and just to kind of doing some projects here and there, and she's learning, but she like refuses to look at like plans or look at YouTube videos, and all she's doing is just taking my tools and freaking like the other day I looked at my freaking the bit to my drill was just like fucking mangled and shit, and I'm like, you gotta go slower. She's just like jamming it in there, burning it and shit, and so like you can have the tools, but you need someone to show you how to do it. I kind of feel like that's Duncan. Like I think he's like grossly overrated. Now, I don't think Pulyaev is very good at all. I definitely get what you're saying. I think this is tailor made for Duncan to have, one of the most dominant performances of his career. Duncan is better than him everywhere. He's a better athlete. He hits harder. He's a better wrestler. He's a better grappler. I think he dominates Pulyaev. I think he's going to slowly pull away with just being, just way cleaner striker. I think the cumulative effect will finally get to Pulyaev, whose body will start to fail him. I say Duncan gets a 3rd round TKO. You know what I hope happens? You mentioned that there's 2 Duncans on the card. Are we still recorded?
Yeah.
Okay, all right. I want my question recorded. I just want to make sure. Like, I hope the UFC, I hope everything gets screwed up. Like, they get 2 Duncans, and I don't know. The DJ plays the wrong song for this guy's entrance. He plays the other Duncan song, and I don't know.
What are the chances the buffer fouls something up with?
Oh, dude! I hope the other Duncan gets called Leroy Duncan. Because if he calls this one Chris Duncan, all right, whatever. Stop being a weirdo with 2 last names. Like, whatever. But
if he calls the Scottish guy Leroy.
Oh, I love that. That would be awesome. And, like the UFC media guy gives Chris Leroy Duncan's girlfriend the wrong tickets, and she's sitting next to the other Chris Duncan's family, and, and that'd be awesome.
Yes, it would.
That's what I'm rooting for more than anything.
Next up on the UFC London undercard is the lone heavyweight bout of the night, unless Krispy Kreme ends up reaching out to Jan Blachowicz and Carlos Ulberg as well as Shellen and Duffy this week. It is Marcin Tybura versus Mick Parkin. Tybura, the 39-year-old Pole, is 26-9 overall. He is 13-8 since joining the UFC as the former M1 heavyweight champ. He has alternated wins and losses over his last 5 fights, stretching back 2 full years at this point. He's coming in off a win. He fought most recently at UFC 309 last November, where he hammered Jonata Diniz into a doctor stoppage between rounds. He will look to break his cycle of alternating wins and losses and pick up back-to-back wins for the first time since February of 2023 at the expense of the undefeated Parkin. 29-year-old London native is 10-0 overall. He is 4-0 since joining the UFC out of season 6 of Dana White's Contender Series. He fought twice last year. In March, he picked up a unanimous decision over Muhammad Usman. Then in July at UFC London, the same card that half the fighters on this card fought at last year, he knocked out Lucas Dresky in the first round. Odds here are extremely close, so I'll kick it out to you, Keith. Your favorite is -115, underdog +105. Who are they?
Wow. Tybura is a favorite.
You're correct. Tybura is the favorite. He's -115, Parkin +105. It is it's not just possible. I would make the case that Marcin Tybura is at this point the third greatest mixed martial artist ever to come from Poland after Joanna Jędrzejczyk and Jan Blachowicz. Having said that, he spent...
It's like being the tallest midget or something. Like, that's not that impressive.
It's interesting because Poland, it's a developed country with a great economy. It's got a lot of people. It's got probably continental Europe's best promotion in KSW. You'd think their top shelf of all time mixed martial artists would be shinier than having like Marcin Tybura and like Mateusz Gamrot on it. No, nothing against either of them, but Tybura, I feel as though I've been unnecessarily harsh on the guy. Like, up until about 4 years ago, I would kind of back on him with stuff like, he's so nonviolent and his fights are so dull that he's not even allowed back into Poland just because KSW is such an extravagantly violent promotion. But since then, he's gotten meaner. Like, even at heavyweight, you're not becoming a better athlete between age 35 and 40. And it's not as if his basic skill set has had any radical changes, but none of his last 4 fights have made it to the final horn. He's become much more of a fun heavyweight to watch. That might end here against Mick Parkin. I'm kind of surprised they put Parkin here in this matchup. Because here's the thing. Parkin is 10-0 as a pro. He's 4-0 in the UFC. But I can't imagine anyone outside of Parkin and his camp see him as like a title contender at this point. Like, he's... What on earth is the name of that heavyweight from Mississippi?
Mississippi heavyweight.
Big athletic looking white guy who's the one of the worst heavyweights in the UFC in recent years. Like,
that Parkin fought?
No.
Tybura fought?
No. Give me just a sec here.
Heavyweight. He was good from Mississippi.
Like, we make fun of him all the time.
A white guy?
Yeah.
Oh, short guy.
No, it's tall, athletic looking.
Chase Sherman?
Yes, thank you.
Oh, I didn't know he was from Mississippi. All right.
At this point, Parkin is undefeated, but in terms of what he's delivering in the cage, it's like a very deluxe Chase Sherman. He is a big guy. He's even big for heavyweight. He's a guy that, comes in around 260 pounds on weigh-ins day, but he is a pretty good fundamental boxer with not huge power by heavyweight standards. You look at his record. Yeah, he's more than half of his career wins are by knockout or TKO, but they're mostly accumulation of damage type knockouts against people that weren't great at defending themselves on the feet. I look at the way that Mick Parkin has beaten his opponents in the UFC, and I haven't seen him do anything that I think is going to work against Marcin Tybura. That's like, say what you want about the guy. He's been a top 10 heavyweight in the UFC for like a decade now, and he's not an easy out. If you only do one thing well, unless you do it super, super well, Tybura is smart enough and well-rounded enough that he's just not going to give you a chance to do it. He's very good. Tybura is at wrestling the striker and striking with the grappler. Here against Parkin, I think he might pursue an all the way out, all the way in type fight. I think I like Tybura's wrestling has never been as great as some people have believed, but just the threat of the takedown, I don't think Parkin is going to get his boxing untracked here at all. I think Tybura is going to be taller, have greater reach. I can see him just stepping in and initiating and forcing the clinch. He loves the clinch when Parkin gets into boxing range. Extended sequences against the fence, I think Tybura wins those. I could see this being a fight where 80% of the action takes place on or outside the warning track, near the edge of the octagon, and it's Tybura just pressing Parkin into the fence, kneeing him, hitting him with little shit to the ribs, and just making life miserable for him. I don't think the O2 Arena crowd is going to like this very much, but give me Tybura to just grind and smother Mick Parkin for at least 2 rounds out of 3 in kind of a miserable fight to watch.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like we've broken down Tybura a lot, and he hasn't changed too much. I mean, he's just like kind of gritty, not great at anything, but not bad at anything either kind of guy. He's a pretty well-rounded guy. He's not a big power puncher for a heavyweight, but he does have solid volume. He moves forward, forcing his opponents to kind of try to counter-strike him. He likes like front kicks to push his opponent back. He wants to force him against the cage because he doesn't like being pressured back. He's got fairly fast hands for heavyweight. He likes to close the distance, you mentioned, and he has no problem grinding in the clinch. He loves grabbing on an underhook and just staying glued right in that position, shoulder shots, stomping on the feet. He excels at just kind of wearing his opponent down. From there, he'll drop down to a single and run the pipe and get a takedown. He'll catch a kick if you throw a kick and get the fight to the ground. He's got good top control. He's got, he's a BJJ black belt. He has 8 subs on his record, though he was quickly subbed by Sergey Spivak, though I think that was a little fluky. Not fluky that Spivak won, but just how he won.
And probably more down to how much Spivak has improved.
Yeah, Spivak, yeah. He went from like lower level UFC to like a ranked guy. So as far as Parkin, I like some of the things he does. He moves pretty well for heavyweight. He's a better athlete than he looks. You mentioned Chase Sherman. He's kind of like the polar opposite, in where Chase Sherman is like looks like he'd be a great athlete and he's terrible, and then Parkin looks like he's a terrible athlete and he's pretty good. And in fairness, he slimmed up a little bit. He's a volume striker for heavyweight. He's constantly moving forward. He throws tight shots down the pipe. He's got a nice jab. I think he's improving his accuracy. He showed improved power against Lucas Brisky, hurting him. Defensively, he still turtles up, which I'm not a very fan of. He was hurt bad on Dana White's Contender Series because of that poor defense. I mean, that was a long time ago, but he battered Muhammad Usman with leg calf kicks, or something I think he could do a little bit to Tybura. He's a decent wrestler. I mean, he'll shoot for a takedown, though he won't have any setups. There's times where he will abandon his wrestling, like he tried it against Usman. I think he just assumed Usman was a better wrestler. So I should say he didn't try it against Usman. He abandoned his wrestling against Usman. He has a good top game if he does get the fight to the ground. If taken down, he can work back to his feet. He's a big guy. I like Parkin. I think he's a solid heavyweight. However, I'm with you. I'm leaning Tybura. I think they're both similar fighters, but Tybura has faced the higher competition. I think he's going to close the distance. Like you said, I think we see the fight very similar. I think he's going to grind on Parkin. I think he might get a takedown or two. Just very Tybura type decision where it doesn't. Yeah, he lands more strikes on the feet, but they never really hurts him, and just kind of a boring heavyweight fight. So give me Tybura by decision.
Men's flyweights are up next at UFC London as Lanier Kavanagh takes on Felipe dos Santos. Kavanagh, the 25-year-old Englishman, is 8-0 overall. He is 1-0 since joining the UFC out of Season 8 of Dana White's Contender Series. He scored a first-round knockout on the Contender Series last August, then made his UFC debut in November at UFC Macau, where he took a unanimous decision over Jose Ochoa. He will look to keep his professional record perfect against Dos Santos. 24-year-old Brazilian is 8-2 with 1 no contest overall. He is 1-2 in the UFC. Coming in off a loss, he dropped a unanimous decision to Andrey Lima at UFC Fight Night Burns versus Brady last September. That that leaves him looking to even up his UFC mark at 500. He is not favored to do so, as Kavanagh is another strong favorite at minus 320, Dos Santos plus 260 on the comeback.
Wow.
It's a couple of men's flyweights, 25 or younger. Gotta love that. Is there anything else to love about this matchup and about either of these fighters?
Yeah, you asked, which fight is one of the best fights on the card, and this is definitely one of the best. I said earlier Wood and Charriere was my favorite, but this one's out there. But like that's kind of always my answer when it comes, insert flyweight fight. I think both guys are really good. I think the line should be much tighter. Dos Santos, he's a really good athlete. He's constantly moving forward. He has high output. He's got quick hands, nice power jab, follows with clean, straight shots on the pipe. He's got plus power for flyweight, though he will overthrow his shots, kind of leave him to be countered. He's more of like a athlete than he is a technician. But he'll throw some spinning attacks. He'll throw some flying knees. He's got a big kicking game. I like his step in knees. I like his teep kicks. He doesn't really care about defense, which would be a huge problem against a striker of the caliber of Kavanagh. He eats a lot of shots. He stands tall. He keeps his chin high in the air. He was hurt to the body in the past, but he's shown he can eat a shot, and he ate some big shots from Manel Cop, which not many people can say they can take, and he's one of them that can. So I'll give him credit for that. He's a solid wrestler, and he wrestles a lot. He'll just dive right in for takedowns, sometimes not the best setup. If he gets to fight the ground, he does need to improve his control, something that probably keeps him from being a bigger threat on the ground. A little too wild on top. He'll lose position, trying to be offensive, kind of rushing positions and submissions. He also needs to improve his own takedown defense. He's so aggressive on the feet that he kind of walk himself right into takedowns. He showed improvement in his get-up game, though. He's kind of scrambly. And he's got incredible cardio. I mean, he fights like a madman, and he really doesn't slow down. So if Kavanagh, he's obviously a way more decorated and clean striker, but if he starts to slow down, I could see Dos Santos having success. Now, what I love about Kavanagh is he's only 25 years old. So, you got to like that. He's newer in the UFC. Obviously, I know it's not his debut, but he's a good athlete. He's a really good striker. He's a K1 kickboxing champion. He fights out of both stances. He's got high output on the feet. He's fast. He's explosive. He's more of like a counter striker. He uses footwork really well to kind of cut the angles to vary his attacks. He's got big power. I love that he works the body, big kicking game, likes push kicks, hard body kicks, throw some thumping calf kicks. He will even catch a kick to get the fight to the ground, but he's clearly not a wrestler. Though so far he's had pretty solid takedown defense. Though he hasn't faced really high caliber wrestler. I think the line is way off. Probably because I'm much higher on Dos Santos and Kavanagh. This is, say what you want, this is still a step up in competition for Kavanagh. This is the best guy that he's faced. And I'm gonna go upset here. I will say this, like my pick's not confident or anything like that, but the reason why I'm saying upset, until I see a more established ground game or Kavanagh can handle somebody who's going to try to press the fight to the ground, which I'm assuming Dos Santos will try to get this fight to the ground, I'll have a hard time picking him. So Kavanagh definitely has the much higher upside. If you ask me that question, like which guy could be a future champion contender, something like that, like the answer is Kavanagh easily. But I wonder if this is going to be one of those like too much too soon. I think Santos is going to take him down. I think he's going to be on top for a majority of the fight. Give me Dos Santos. I'll say he wins by decision.
I can absolutely see that route to victory for Dos Santos. You make a good point. He is a substantial step up in competition from anybody Kavanagh has fought, either back in Cage Warriors, on the Contender Series, or in his UFC debut. And even if Dos Santos pulls off the upset here, it's not time to jump ship on Kavanagh. I think you put it right you put it right as a too much, too soon. Like he would be far from the first standout kickboxer to run into a speed bump like that on the way up.
One thing I would say, I do like Kavanagh because he came out of Cage Warriors. Like that always makes me feel better about a guy. That's a very, really good regional promotion.
Yeah. Oh, completely agree. Again, there are 7 former Cage Warriors champs on this card. The only reason Kavanagh isn't one of them is because he got snatched up by the UFC after just 3 or 4 fights in Cage Warriors, just because he was so dazzling, I think. But here's the thing. I can see Dos Santos, for lack of a better word, exposing the current state of Kavanagh's defensive wrestling and grappling and get-up game. That wouldn't shock me. And because of that, I do feel as though this line should probably be a good bit closer than it is. But if Dos Santos either isn't onto that game plan, or it turns out that Kavanagh's takedown defense is just fine, I do think Kavanagh is tailor-made to take advantage of Dos Santos's lapses on the feet, his head movement, tendency to overswing. Certainly, if Dos Santos tries telegraph takedowns from the outside without enough setup, Kavanagh is the kind of guy that could punish him with an intercepting knee or uppercut or something. I'm going to pick Kavanagh to remain undefeated here, pick up the win over Dos Santos, but I would love it if, I don't especially care who wins, but whoever wins, I would love to see this go long enough and play out in such a way that we do learn something more about Kavanagh's ground game. Like, is he going to be able to do the K1 thing on UFC level flyweights that want to take him down? I'll take Kavanagh by decision here, but it is definitely not with minus 325 worth of confidence. Next up at UFC Fight Night 255, and at least as the card is constituted as of the beginning of fight week, the top prelim is a lightweight matchup between Jai Herbert and Chris Padilla. Herbert, the 36-year-old Greater Birmingham native, is 13-5-1 overall. He's 3-4-1 since joining the UFC as the outgoing Cage Warriors lightweight champ. He's coming in off of a win. He took a unanimous decision over Rolando Bedoya at UFC on ABC Sandhagen versus Nurmagomedov last August. That allowed him to bounce back from his loss to Fares Ziam at UFC London 2 summers ago. Herbert, despite having been in the UFC for over 5 years at this point and fought a high level of competition, still has yet to put together back-to-back wins in the octagon. He will look to do so here against Padilla. Padilla, 29-year-old Californian, is 15-6 overall. He is 2-0 since joining the UFC as the outgoing lightweight champ from Up Next Fighting, one of Southern California's faster growing promotions. He fought most recently at UFC Fight Night Burns versus Brady last September, where he battered Rong Zhu into a doctor stoppage late in the second round. So he's looking to continue to surprise and impress with a 3rd straight win to open his UFC career. Keith, your favorite is minus 130. Underdog plus 110. Who are they?
Herbert's favorite.
You are correct. Jai Herbert is minus 130. Chris Padilla plus 110. Keith, who is the best fighter under 500 in the UFC, and why is it Jai Herbert? And who
He'd be
wins
up
this
there.
fight?
I don't know if he's the best, but I'd have to look at everybody who has that record. But I mean, I agree with you saying he's definitely better than his record.
Four losses: Francisco Trinaldo in 2020.
Yeah.
Moicano, Ilia Topuria, Fares Ziam.
Stud. Yeah, there you go. That's why. Yeah. 3 studs and Trinaldo, who was pretty good at that. I mean, it was at least a tough test for anybody, really for about a decade. So, Yeah, I mean, Herbert, I mean, he's really big for the weight class. He's a good athlete. He moves really well. He uses footwork to work from distance. He likes to be on the outside because he's a rangy striker. He's a really clean striker. He has nice output on the feet, nice jab. He follows with straight shots down the pipe. If he gets in close, he starts looking for slicing elbows. He's got good power. I mean, even you mentioned Ternell. He dropped Ternell in that fight. Again, it was a long time ago. He's touched somebody else too. I forgot. He's got a big kicking game. I like his high kick. He needs to learn to check leg kicks though. Kyle Nelson and even Roland Bedoya had success with him going after his calves. He's an underrated wrestler. Not what you really think of him, but he likes to use his size to get in the clinch. Gets the fight to the ground. He's a solid grappler. He's got some good back takes. He likes to go to the body triangle because he has those long legs. He needs to improve his own takedown defense. I can go back to like the Moicano fight. Moicano was easily taking him down. Move on to Padilla. Padilla is, he's a fairly well-rounded fighter. Not the best athlete. He's got to improve his hand speed. But to his credit, he's a pretty technical striker. He's a boxer. He's got a good jab. I'd say plus power. He throws a lot of kicks, though he doesn't really set them up. If he goes after those calf kicks, he's got some good ones. He blasted Rong Zhu with a perfectly timed step-in elbow, which obviously I love. He likes to close the distance, work in the clinch. He wants to get to the fight to the ground, but I wouldn't say he's a very good wrestler. But if he does get the fight to the ground, and a lot of his takedowns will come from like a clinch takedown or something. But if he gets to the ground, he's mean. He's got some mean ground and pound. He's got 5 subs on his record. So as far as prediction goes, I don't like this line either. And not how I normally say. I usually want to say it closer. I like Herbert fairly easily. I think they're similar fighters. I think Herbert's bigger. I think he's a better athlete. I think he's a cleaner striker on the feet. Padilla he's an overachiever so far in the UFC. He's a guy that I didn't expect him to win as much as he has in the UFC. I just think the buck stops here. I think Herbert batters him. I think Herbert gets him out of there. I think Herbert has a really nice showing in front of his hometown crowd. I see he wins by second round, and I like it so much, man. I'm making it my most confident pick of the night. I'm betting the house on it. Place all your money on Jai Herbert.
I would love to differ with you just for the sake of drama, but I see it very similarly. Chris Padilla debuted in the UFC to relatively little fanfare. I remember joking / criticizing about Sergey Spivak that when you make it to the UFC off of wins over like Travis Fulton and Tony Lopez, you may not be ready for prime time. Chris Padilla came into the UFC off of knocking out Justin James, who I think went 1-5 in the UFC. I wasn't expecting much. He's won 2 straight fights by pretty impressive stoppage over guys that aren't terrible. But I like the term he used that the buck stops here, because Herbert is a step well above James Yontop or Rong Zhu. And yeah, Padilla would have to just get a lights out, perfectly timed technique like he did against Rong Zhu to really have a good chance of beating Herbert here. Sometimes Herbert's fights can maybe not always get out of second gear. I think this one will. I think Padilla will force the issue. He's a guy that on some level knows his best chance to win this fight is to catch Herbert in a mistake, maybe force a mistake. I think Padilla is going to be aggressive, and I think that's tailor-made for Herbert to kind of snipe him. Give me Herbert to chew up Padilla at range, also do at least his share of damage in the clinch. If it turns into a wrestling match at any point, I'm with you that Herbert's offensive wrestling in particular is underrated. What round did you pick?
I went second round.
I like Herbert to get the finish here as well. Give me Herbert to get a third round TKO of Padilla. Probably something where he just rings him up again on the feet, falls into the ground, finishes it down there. But I have Herbert to delight the UK crowd here as well. The 6-fight main card of UFC London opens up with a meeting of former Cage Warriors champs, as former Cage Warriors bantamweight champ Nathaniel Wood takes on former featherweight champ Morgan Charriere in a featherweight contest. Wood, the 31-year-old Englishman, is 20-6 overall. He's 9-3 since joining the UFC, again as the outgoing Cage Warriors bantamweight champ. 9-3 in the UFC. He is 4-1 since moving up to 145 pounds. Well, there's one fight in there that was at a 140-pound catch weight, but effectively above bantamweight, he's 4-1, and he's coming in off a win. He fought at UFC London last July, taking a unanimous decision over Daniel Pineda. He will look to make it 2 wins in a row against Charriere. 29-year-old Frenchman. His record, 20 wins, 10 losses, 1 draw. He is 2-1 since joining the UFC as the outgoing Cage Warriors featherweight champ. He is also coming in off a win. He fought most recently last September at UFC Fight Night Moicano versus Santini, knocking out Gabriel Miranda early in the second round. He is also looking for a second straight win. He is favored to get it. Charriere is -170, Wood +140. Keith, I was mildly surprised that Morgan Charriere is under 30, just because it feels like he's a guy that I expected to make it to the UFC at some point over the last 8 years and just never quite. And the 10 losses on his tally kind of tell part of the story, because he always just seemed to drop an inopportune loss somewhere in Europe at just the wrong time. But he's still under 30. And conversely, I was mildly surprised that Nathaniel Wood is over 30, just because he still feels like the 25-year-old, well, his nickname is the Prospect, that dropped into the UFC a few years back. And I have to remember that injuries and other things have kept him out of the cage maybe more than he would like. Do you see contender upside in either of these guys in one of the toughest divisions to say that about? And who gets it done on Saturday?
Yeah, that's the tricky part, because of that division. It's you take one loss and it's brutal. You take one loss and you're dropping. Like we were talking about the phone call, like how many wins do you have to win before you get the phone call? You lose one in this division, instantly add 3 more wins to get back in, just to be where you were.
Because there's some dude who's won 6 in a row who's happy that his name moved up one.
Yeah, and that guy who's 6 in a row hasn't even cracked the top 15 yet.
Nope.
So do I see contenders? Maybe. I'll say maybe. Like it's not like we were talking about, like, basketball shot, like how far of a shot is it from the basketball court? It's a full court shot. They're not shooting from the parking lot, but this is pretty far. But I hope I'm wrong, because I like both guys. I think both guys are really entertaining. Wood's one of these kind of tweeners. Like he moved up in division, but he's still probably a little too small for that one. But like I still think it's like a better thing for his career to move up. He's a really good striker, a very composed boxer, accurate, nice jab. He also loves that like straight follow up right. He showed power against Daniel Pineda. He kept hurting Pineda with shots. Because he's got such a boxing heavy style, his defense is a little boxing way. Like he does a lot of shoulder rolls, which I'm not the biggest fan of. I think it works much better in boxing than it does in MMA. He also he has been hit more than I like. I mean, he's been rocked in many fights. He's taken a lot of damage. He's got I call him a boxer, but he's got some good teep kicks up the middle. I go back to like the Charles Rosa fight, which was a really long time ago, but he murdered Rosa with calf kicks. He combines his punches and kicks well, especially in close. He's one of the guys who throws kicks from the pocket, which you don't see a lot. Like a lot of guys only throw kicks from the outside. He'll throw it from the pocket. He's a solid wrestler. Good upper body takedowns. He's got decent entries. He's a very good grappler. He's a submissions ready. He's got 6 subs on his record. He's got good submission defense. Charriere, I'll say this. I thought he beat Chepe Mariscal, which is a hell of a feat. I don't know, because I'm very high on Chepe.
We were just talking about people that have won 5 or 6 straight at featherweight and aren't even in the rankings yet. Yeah.
Yeah, he ain't gonna lose. He's gonna win. He's probably gonna win 5 or 6 more in a row. So to me even say that I think Charriere should have won that fight, and again, a very close fight, is a hell of a feat. But that's the other thing we were talking about earlier. Like you take a really close decision loss that you could have won that just sets you back so much. So on the feet, he's a really good striker. He's very relaxed and patient. The problem is he can cruise at times, not throwing enough. He's got quick hands. He's accurate. He keeps everything tight. I love his left hook. He works the body really well. He's got good power base. I think he's got like 12 TKOs. Just got a TKO over Gabriel Miranda. Great calf kicks. I've seen him hurt many people with his calf kicks. Though he will throw kicks without a setup. He does check leg kicks, which I like. He's not much of an offensive wrestler, but he's got strong takedown defense if you try to take him down. He has a good grapple if he gets to fight the ground. He's got 3 subs. Like I said, this is my favorite fight on the card. And despite me saying that I don't see either one of these guys as like a champion of the division one day, I'm still really high on both guys. I was surprised. I knew the line was going to be close. I thought it'd be closer. I actually thought Woodman might be the slight favorite because he's faced big man. He's been in the UFC for a while. Obviously he's got some good wins in his career. I think both guys will have their moments. I really flip-flopped, especially because Wood's defense, like his defensive style, makes his opponents seem to be doing better than they really are. But on the flip side, like Charriere's lack of volume kind of gives his opponent rounds. So they like both handicap themselves a little bit. I'm really torn. I'm gonna take the accuracy of Charriere to be the difference. I'm gonna say he's gonna land the cleanest shots because of that. He might have. We've seen Nathaniel Wood get hurt before. Charriere hits really hard. I don't think Charriere will put him out, but I think he might buckle him a couple times. I think that might be the difference. I still think Wood's gonna have moments. I would say Charriere wins by split decision.
I like a lot of things about the breakdown here, and it's interesting because I'm with you. It's tough for me to picture either of these guys really breaking into the top 10, and it's nothing against them. It's more about the division because both of these guys are very talented fighters who have been right in there against some very good competition. But something that you sort of mentioned there is the problem. For as talented as they are, both of them struggle to consistently win close rounds. Like Charriere, I mentioned that, this is a guy that had, almost 10 losses before ever making it to the UFC and dropped a couple of fights just at inopportune times but here's the thing. The people that he lost to, going 1-1 with Paul Hughes has aged incredibly well for Morgan Charriere.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Paul Hughes is a stud.
Yeah. Having a nip and tuck, very, very competitive title fight with Jordan Vucenic that we're going to talk about in a few minutes here, that's turned out to age well.
So I'm sorry to interrupt you, but you've used nip and tuck twice now. Is that because Austin Vanderfort's in the UFC and we see more of Paige Van Zandt? Is that why that's on your mind?
Whew.
You used this a couple of times. That's not really one that you use a lot.
No, and you know what? If she is going to make a serious go at this power slap thing, she's going to need some nips and tucks,
There you go.
In places where she hasn't had them yet. So, yeah. Wait, somebody will say I got to stop saying nip and tuck at this point. Yeah, with Charriere struggling to throw enough volume to look like he's winning close rounds is an issue, and Wood has some of the same issue thanks to the defensive habits that you mentioned. I'm leaning Charriere here as well, and on top of everything else, it's that if one guy does land fight changing or at least round winning offense in a single technique, it's more likely to be Charriere. So while I think these are both very good fighters, and as two guys, again, that sometimes struggle to put their stamp on close rounds, has potential splitter written all over it, give me Charriere as well. And yeah, I wouldn't have been surprised if this were a pick'em. Lightweights take the cage next at UFC London as Jordan Vucenic takes on Chris Duncan, the other Chris Duncan. Vucenic, the 29-year-old Englishman, is 13-3 overall. He is 0-1 since joining the UFC as a former Cage Warriors featherweight champ. He made a short notice debut against Guram Kutateladze at UFC on ABC, Sandhagen versus Nurmagomedov last August. We already talked about that briefly during our preview of Kutateladze's fight, but for stepping up on short notice as a former featherweight, moving up to lightweight against a big lightweight, he acquitted himself pretty well. He has decided to stay at 155 pounds, at least for now, and is going to look to get that one back against Duncan. Duncan, 31-year-old Scot, is 12-2 overall. He's 3-1 since joining the UFC as a two-time veteran of Dana White's Contender Series. He lost on season 5, got knocked out by Slava Barshov, won a couple of fights in Europe, came back for season 6, and knocked out Charlie Campbell in the first round. Since then, again, he is 3-1, and he's coming in off of a win. He tapped out Balaji Oki in the first round. Well, didn't even tap him out, napped him out in the first round at UFC Fight Night Moicano versus Santini last September. That allowed him to bounce back from his first loss in the UFC, which was a submission loss to Manuel Torres last February. Odds here favor Vucenic heavily. He is minus 360, Duncan plus 280. Man, I like Jordan Vucenic. Again, we're talking about he's either going to settle in at 145 or 155 in the UFC. My automatic answer to is fighter X a future top 10 fighter in those divisions is, well, probably not. But it wouldn't shock me. In terms of athleticism, the just right kind of aggressive mindset and killer instinct you want to see on the regional level, constant improvements. It would be surprising to me if Chris Duncan were ever a top 10 fighter. Well, it would be shocking to me if Chris Duncan became a top 10 fighter. It would be surprising if Jordan Vucenic did, but not shocking. Just he has a certain something, and a certain something like also looking like a bad guy from a John Wick movie. I think Vucenic is gonna make pretty quick work of Duncan. Actually, Duncan's gonna want to. Duncan, as the taller, rangier guy, is going to want to strike with him at range, at the outer edge of boxing range, and I just don't trust him to get that done against someone as aggressive, athletic, explosive as Vucenic, who is equally likely to jump in with like a haymaker or a flying knee as a takedown attempt. I don't think Duncan is equipped to make those kind of on-the-fly reactions to what a very aggressive, athletic opponent is doing to him. Give me Vucenic to affirm his status as one of the bigger favorites on the card, maybe club and sub Duncan, or just duck under something, drag him to the ground, take his back, and choke him out. But I'm going to take Jordan Vucenic by first round submission here.
Yeah, it's funny. When we talk about Cage Warriors and all the guys coming off Cage Warriors and stuff, and you know, from this region, and Vucenic is also this like huge prospect that kind of never really got as much credit as these other guys. He's kind of like that, you know, third or fourth guy in the pecking order, but this guy's freaking good too. And
he also went 1-1 with Paul Hughes, like, you know, like,
yeah, exactly. But he's got, you know, I think I'm a little higher on Duncan than you are. So I think this is, you know, the right test at this point. Duncan's, I mean, he's not a very good athlete, but he just makes up for just being insanely tough. He's a pocket boxer. He gets in the pocket. He throws big shots. He's type, this kind of stand your ground type striker. Throws a lot of tight inside boxing blows. He has nice power. He really steps into his shots. He's got 7 TKOs. He mixes punches. He kicks together well. He throws a lot of kicks, hard calf kicks. You mentioned his defense. His defense is the issue. He doesn't really move his head. He drops his hands. He's been hurt a lot. But he's one of these guys. He's one to land one of his own. He can sneak in a takedown, but I wouldn't categorize him a wrestler. And I think he's a poor defensive wrestler. He can't catch a submission though. He got a great guillotine choke against Oki in their fight. Though he was quickly subbed by Manuel Torres, but I mean Torres is really good. Vucenic, I mean like you mentioned, he beat Hughes. He beat Charriere too. So there's another great win on his record. He's big for the weight class. He's a very good athlete. He's elusive. He's a good striker, very aggressive, gets in the pocket. He's really good boxing inside. He has got quick hands. He's got nice pop in his hands. I mean, he dropped Kutateladze in their fight. He's got a nice check left hook, good calf kicks. Not much of an offensive wrestler. He's a weak defensive wrestler, but he's a good submission artist. He's got 6 subs when the fight hits the ground. So sometimes you take him down, it might not be the best idea. I see him get submissions off his back. I think this is a really fun fight. I mean, Duncan is, say what you want about him. He's always, in the action fights, either he's getting a stoppage or he's getting stopped, or it's just, just nonstop action. So I think Duncan's best avenue of victory, even though I just mentioned that Vucenic's good on the ground, is to try to take the fight down. That could give him moments, but even with moments, I still don't think that's going to be enough to beat Vucenic. Vucenic is just a way better athlete. I think he hurts Duncan. I think he hurts a bunch on the feet. I think Duncan's so freaking tough, he might be hard to be stopped. Might take some longevity off of his career because of that. I think Vucenic cruises to decision. I think he dominates. Give me Vucenic by unanimous decision.
Next up on the UFC Fight Night 255 main card, Keith, the UFC tried. It's been, going on 3 years now that you have held the firm position that all the UFC should do with Molly McCann is book her in the UK in squash matches that are just designed to get her a win so that she and Patty can pour beer on each other and carry each other around the cage, and a good time will be had by all. And the UFC has not always been great about that. I look no further than when they booked her against Erin Blanchfield in Blanchfield's backyard.
God, what a stupid fight that was.
They tried this time. They put Molly McCann on the main card of UFC London. They brought back Estela Nunes, who is 0-4 in the UFC and has gotten finished in 3 of those fights. It was all set, and then Nunes was forced to withdraw with an injury just days ago, and in on 10 days' notice steps Alexia Thainara. So we have a whole different fight to talk about here.
She should have fought Bannon or Puja. They should have moved them up.
I'm completely on board here, and let's talk about. Let me introduce these two, and then let's have a little talk about that. McCann, 34-year-old Liverpudlian, is 14-7 overall. She is 7-6 since joining the UFC as the outgoing Cage Warriors women's flyweight champ. She is 7-6 in the UFC. She is 1-1 since dropping to strawweight. McCann not been with the game plan as laid out by Keith, because people who know that they are just a fan service, fan favorite attraction for friendly arenas don't drop a weight class in their mid-30s. That's for people who think they are probably a future champ. Molly McCann, nonetheless, has done that. And again, she is 1-1 at 115 pounds. She's coming in off a loss. She fought most recently at UFC 304 last July, where she dropped a unanimous decision to Bruna Brazil. She has now lost 3 of her last 4 fights, dating all the way back to that Blanchfield matchup over 2 years ago. She had been scheduled to take on Estela Nunes in London. Again, Nunes 0-4 in the UFC. I'm comfortable saying McCann would have been a strong favorite in that fight. Instead, in on a week and a half notice, steps Contender Series signee Alexia Thainara. 27-year-old Brazilian is 11-1 overall. She fought on the Contender Series last September, taking a unanimous decision over Rose Conceição. Despite the fact that she is unproven at the top level, despite the fact that she is coming in on less than 2 weeks' notice, Thainara is a 2-1 favorite. She's minus 200. McCann plus 170 coming back. Yeah, wow. You said it. Shauna, Bannon, and Puja Tomar are fighting on the third fight of the prelims. Okay, stipulating that the UFC probably wouldn't have matched McCann against Bannon since they're kind of in the same boat promotionally. If they put McCann against Tomar, I have the feeling that McCann would have been the favorite, or at least, Tomar wouldn't have been minus 200. This has disappointment and sadness for the arena written all over it. I don't know if Alexia Thainara is a future contender at strawweight, but honestly, it wouldn't shock me. She's, for someone that is a very good grappler, a judo and jiu-jitsu fighter by inclination, when I started watching her fights, I was pleasantly surprised at how not terrible her striking is. Theoretically, McCann, Meatball Molly, thought of as kind of a blood and guts boxer, but what elevated her into this stratosphere of stardom in the first place was back-to-back spinning knockouts way back in like 2022. Those were completely against type for McCann, who was mostly just sort of a red-nosed, just red-nosed, medium-powered women's flyweight boxer. And since then, her best success has come wrestling and grappling, and she has gotten thrashed on the feet by a couple of her opponents. If this fight took place completely on the feet, I think Alexia Thainara can probably hold her own with Molly McCann. McCann isn't a great athlete at 125 or 115. When she's at her best on the feet, she does throw in combination well, which is nice. A lot of women don't. I don't think she has great hand speed. I don't think she's a great athlete, period, which is kind of what made those back-to-back spinning strike knockouts so jaw-dropping. Thainara's going to be about her same size, probably have a little reach on her, have better hand speed. If this thing takes place completely on the feet, I think Thainara is probably, she would be at least even money in my book to win, unless there's just horrible judging malfeasance because it's, McCann's country. But then the whole other side of this is Thainara is a very, very good grappler, and she's a good grappler from her back as well as from top position. So McCann's whole thing of using the clinch and using well-timed kind of body lock and trip takedowns as a safety valve when she doesn't like what she's getting on the feet is not going to serve her well against Thainara. For me, the UFC's whole job here is just to let Molly McCann get this place unglued with a great performance, and this ain't it. Give me Alexia Thainara to have a successful UFC debut. I'm going to say she gets a decision where the crowd is just bracing to explode if McCann can do something impressive, land a big shot, or at least just like land a big takedown where she just dumps and slams Thainara. Those are going to be few and far between, maybe non-existent, as Thainara takes all 3 rounds and just kind of silences this crowd.
Yeah, I mean, this fight got way freaking harder for Meatball Molly. Man, I like Molly McCann. Like, I like the whole Patty Molly, like, crazy.
It's so wholesome.
Yeah.
Like, how often do we get wholesome fun in MMA?
Yeah, just 2 friends like drinking and partying and dancing and cheering each other on the side. Like, it's fun.
Yeah.
But geez, the UFC fucked this thing up so bad. Like, why? I just want to tell people at the UFC, like, why are you so bad sometimes at like not understanding your own product. Anyways, I mean, we know what we got from Molly. She's a bad athlete. You call her red nosed. I love that. Like, she's such a bad athlete. If she was put in the reindeer games, she ain't winning those anyways. So, she tries that was a Rudolph the Red-Nosed joke there for you guys at home. That might have been too big of a pull on that one. She tries.
Or the really old school people are like, oh, like, you mean my favorite fightwear brand from 1996? Like, they're picturing like Pedro Hizzo's like old trunks. Yeah.
Yeah, there you go. Nice. That's a good pull. So she tries to make up, with being very unorthodox. She's constantly switching stances. She kind of uses movements to get her opponents guessing. I've said it before, like it's difficult for opponents to pick up her timing because she does everything so unusual. She likes to get in, land, and get out before countered. She has good volume. She has decent hand speed. Again, a lot of stuff that I think she's gotten quicker as this like run of like stardom has happened. She has plus power. That's because she steps into her shots. You mentioned the spinning attacks, the back-to-back spinning KOs. Again, you know what it's like? Like, they started thinking of her like a spinning attack. It's like the Price is Right. Like, you spin, you get zero. It's like, holy shit, the guy just spun and got zero. And then he spun again, he got zero again. Like, I don't give a shit. If you say, hey, do it again, I'll bet all my life savings he doesn't get zero on it the third time. And that's kind of how I feel about Molly and her spinning attacks. I go back to like Santos destroying her with teep kicks. Bruna Brazil beat up her body really bad. She wasn't reacting to strikes well, which is concerning. You mentioned it, like she'll close the distance. And so she goes from this like big movement, trying to be fast person, to then closing distance and grinding and kind of doing her best Marcin Tybura. She loves dirty boxing battles. She will look for takedowns. She's not bad going for takedowns from clinch, but she's not good at it. Like, I've seen, how many times have you seen her grab a leg and try to run the pipe, and there's all of a sudden the girl just pulls her leg out and she doesn't get it. She's a very weak defensive wrestler, weak sub defense. She does have good cardio though. Thainara, I mean, she's really big for the weight class to start. So that's concerning if she can make the weight on short notice. She's an unorthodox striker. She's very like herky jerky, but she's got good volume. She has, I'd say, decent stand up. It's good. We're gonna have some weird movement between these two. She tends to overthrow her shots. She throws a lot of winging punches. When I say overthrow, I mean like overextending. So she's kind of there to be countered. But when she calms it down and she sets up her strikes with feints, like I said, I kind of with you. I don't mind it. And she has decent pop. And we saw her on a Contender Series fight. She rocked her opponent a couple of times because like the threat of the takedowns to help. She does a lot of calf kicks. She can use her size well in the clinch. She loves the plum clinch. She grabs the back end neck. She's popping off knees and in there. You mentioned she wants to get the fight to the ground. She likes body lock takedowns. She also has really good reactionary takedowns where she just has good timing, lowering her level and getting in. She'll catch a kick if you throw a kick to get it down. She does need to improve her top control, but she's a submission out. She can catch us up, and she's got good cardio. I mean, it was a high-paced fight on the Contender Series. She didn't stop. So I'm kind of all done with McCann. And I think Tyra is just a terrible stylistic matchup. I think she's just going to take it down over and over again. You know what? I originally wrote a unanimous decision, but I think being in England, I think McCann's going to really try to not be stuck on bottom. I think she's going to scramble up, make a mistake, and I think Tyra's going to lock in a submission. I'll see Tyra does in the very first round. Tyra by first round sub.
Third from the top at UFC Fight Night 255 is a welterweight contest between Gunnar Nelson and Kevin Holland. Nelson, the 36-year-old Iceland native, longtime export of SBG Ireland, is 19-5-1 overall. He's 10-5 in the UFC, and he's on a 2-fight winning streak. If you don't remember that, it's because those are his only 2 fights in the last 5.5 years. He has become kind of like a comet that just It's not that he orbits the UFC. The UFC orbits him, and every time it goes to the British Isles, they ask him if he wants to fight. And
we've had more Eclipse recently than we've had Nelson fights.
We've had. It's got to be great if you can get it. Like, props to Gunnar Nelson. Like, he has carved out an existence where he does not need to fight in the UFC. Apparently, he doesn't need to take bad matchups. He doesn't need to fight in the Apex if he doesn't want to.
No.
More power to him. At any rate, his last 2 cage appearances, a unanimous decision over Takashi Sato 3 years ago, and an easy first round submission of Brian Barberena 2 years ago. Before that, you have to go all the way back to fall of 2019 for his fights with Leon Edwards and Gilbert Burns, that at least marked his ceiling as a top 10 welterweight. But again, he is happy to be in an orbit around the promotion. He is orbiting back here for the first time in 2 years, and he's been matched up with Holland, who has 17 fights since the last time Nelson fought. 32-year-old Texan, 26-13 with 1 no contest overall. He is 13-10 with 1 no contest since joining the UFC out of season 2 of Dana White's Contender Series. Holland has famously fought up and down at welterweight, middleweight, catchweights. He is fighting back down at welterweight here for the first time in almost 2 years. He is on a 2-fight losing streak, those both being stoppage losses, one against Roman Dolidze last October, and then one at UFC 311 this January, where he got tapped out by Rainier de Ritter in the first round. So he's going to look to avoid the first 3-fight losing streak of his entire career. He is not favored to get it done, but the line is pretty close. Nelson is minus 140, Holland plus 115.
Wow.
Now, here's something interesting.
Surprise.
Gunnar Nelson is 36 years old. He'll be 37 this summer. He has fought twice in the last 5 years. This will be his first cage appearance in 2 full years.
Oh my God.
And I am more confident that I know how Gunnar Nelson is going to fight in the cage on Saturday than I am Kevin Holland.
Yeah, 100%.
Here's the thing.
Oh, that's so funny.
And
It's
here
so
comes
true.
the
It's
checklist.
so true.
Here's the checklist of if Kevin Holland and his team, well, I know Kevin Holland's team has watched tape on Gunnar Nelson. If Kevin Holland is taking the cut to 170 pounds seriously, if he is taking his coach's advice and game plan seriously, he should be a comfortable favorite in this fight.
Yes. Kevin Holland has thought more about Willie Nelson than Gunnar Nelson recently.
Yes. But there are certain phrases that when I hear myself say them, they just make my blood run cold. And I believe I said this ahead of Holland's fight back in January with Rainier de Ritter. And I'm sticking by it. Like, I'm not trying to just give myself shine for picking de Ritter so emphatically in that fight. Just if I hear myself saying, or I recognize that I am thinking a sentence that includes, if Kevin Holland fights to his best advantage, I need to stop right there. Because I said it about the de Ritter fight. Like, if he fights the right way, he is tailor-made to embarrass de Ritter. Like, he's basically as big as de Ritter, even though they were fighting at middleweights. He is a much better athlete, a much better striker, and while his takedown defense isn't great, Rainier de Ritter's offensive wrestling isn't great either. He should have just completely not just rained, but just like bird shit on Rainier de Ritter's parade joining the UFC, and instead he got tapped out in like 3 minutes. It's the same thing again. Because Gunnar Nelson is, despite his low activity rate, one of the most prolific submission artists in UFC history. I mean, he has 10 wins in the welterweight division, and 8 of them are by submission, and most of them are pretty freaking awesome. But he starts out every fight in the most uncomfortable and awkward looking karate stance ever. And he doesn't have like the pigeon-toed bladed karate stance is pretty much the worst stance. Like, it's a terrible stance for defensive wrestling. It's even worse for offensive wrestling. You have to do so much to get yourself, like, get your level changed and get yourself headed towards the other opponent's lead leg and hip. Nelson, as a guy who's smaller than Holland, older than Holland, and probably not the same athlete, even though I've always thought Nelson was a surprisingly good athlete, and no clear ways to take advantage of Holland's iffy takedown defense, should be tailor-made for Kevin Holland to get a ho-hum win over, where he never even has to mess with Nelson's like incredible ground game. You know, Nelson is really close to having an Abu Dhabi medal on his shelf. Like, he's a multiple-time Mundials medalist, and Holland shouldn't have to mess with any of that, but he's going to. Like, Holland knocking out Jacare from the seat of his pants may have been the worst thing that ever happened to him, because I feel like he has freestyled every fight since then.
He's
I don't know how
right now.
I don't know how Nelson wins this fight, but I am as confident that he wins this fight as you'll ever find me about a minus 140 favorite.
Oh, wow. Most confident pick of the night?
It is not my most confident pick of the night, but it's up there. And I haven't picked any upsets yet tonight. I'm not starting with Holland. Nelson keeps it chalk for me. And you know what? If he gets Holland down, Holland's already done something goofy, and he's probably going to keep doing goofy things. Give me Nelson by second round submission. After a terrible first round where Holland is just standing on the outside and waving his hands like this, and Nelson is like inching back and forth in his karate stance, and it's just awful. But then it busts wide open in the second round.
Yeah. Oh, this fight. Oh my gosh. Kevin Holland. You know what? I'm just gonna do this, dude. We've broken down Kevin Holland tapes. I haven't done any tape study on Kevin Holland since the last time he fought. Like, it comes down to, like, yeah, his fight IQ and all that, but it also comes down to motivation for me. I mean, fighting is his job, but I don't think it's his passion. Like, I think he's just content being this active top 20-ish talent, and that bothers me. If you want a technical breakdown of Kevin Holland, we've broke this guy down 75 times. Like, go to his last one. I'm
pretty sure he's the fighter that we've previewed the most fights for.
Yeah, and I would bet a lot on that. I mean, now Nelson, on the other hand, I love that he's fought twice since he's turned 31. It's like, this guy just let his whole prime just disappear, and it's like, but to his credit, I mean, it's nice to have him back from whatever he was doing. Probably, I don't know, searching for the long lost winged red panda in the mountains of Tibet or some shit, like, knowing. I think Kevin Holland has fought 903 times since Nelson's last fight. Yeah. Holland probably solved 38 crimes since then too. I know he's
invited 13 random people from Twitter to his gym and kicked their ass. Yeah.
I know we've said Bo Nickel's name about 3 million times since Nelson's last fight. So you mentioned, I still want to break down Nelson because
sure.
It's so funny when you said, it was one of the funniest things you said, because I know you didn't mean it to be funny, but it's just so it's funny because it's so true. He's 36. He's fought two times since in the last 5 years. He's at the age where everything can fall apart, and I'm like, I totally agree with you. Like, I know what he's gonna do. He's a karate guy who he keeps his hands low with his wide stance. He's really open to leg kicks, something that Caolan could blast him with leg kicks because he's heavy on his front foot. He switches stances a lot. He's actually fit. He moves pretty well. He has pretty good vision. He likes to dart in and out and attacks. Try to land and then get back out. I like his calf kicks. he closed the distance really well. He wants to get chest to chest. He's looking for, nice trips inside. He also can shoot entries. I mean, he took Leon Edwards down 3 times, which is pretty impressive. You mentioned his grappling. His grappling is very good. I mean, he's competed in some of the biggest BJ tournaments in the world. And I mean, he's grappled against Damian Maia and Gilbert Burns and wasn't subbed against either one of those guys. He's got 14 subs on his record. I think your breakdown was perfect. Like, Holland should win this. I mean, Nelson is so inactive. Holland has this huge striking advantage. He's the way better athlete. He's going to be way bigger. But I said this last time when Holland fought, I'm not picking Holland against anybody that can grapple. And I thought this was going to be like my bold upset pick. I thought Holland was, because he's been active, because he's beaten guys. And I thought people would view Gunnar Nelson as completely shot and washed up. I thought Holland was going to be like a negative 500 favorite. I didn't expect Nelson to be the favorite. If this was a middleweight grapple, if you had the same skills of Nelson but moved at middleweight, I feel pretty confident in my pick. Basically, a Dorita, I know they're not completely similar, but you get the comparison.
Sure.
So, being that welterweight, Holland's not giving up the size. It's not a really hulking guy holding him down. It's got to be really just a guy with superior technique. But I'm in my word. I say Nelson takes him down, and I'd say he catches him with a submission. And I'll say he does in the. You say the second round?
Yep.
I'm gonna say the same. I'll say the second round. Nelson by second round submission.
That brings us to the co-main event of UFC Fight Night 255, a light heavyweight matchup with fairly immediate title implications between Jan Blachowicz and Carlos Ulberg. Blachowicz, the 42-year-old Pole, is 29, 10, and 1 overall. He is 12, 7, and 1 in the UFC. He's coming in off a loss. He dropped a split decision to Alex Pereira all the way back in July of 2023. He has been on the shelf ever since. He just celebrated a birthday a few weeks ago. He would love to celebrate by getting back into the win column and affirming that he is still a factor in the upper reaches of this division. In order to do any of those things, he will have to get past the surging Ulberg. 34-year-old New Zealander is 11 and 1 overall. He is 7 and 1 in the UFC since joining out of season 4 of Dana White's Contender Series. He debuted, and a promising debut ended in disaster when Kennedy Zechukwu caught him in the second round and knocked him out. He bounced back from that inauspicious debut to win his next 7 in a row, including both of his cage appearances of 2024. That would be a 12-second knockout of Alonzo Menafield in May, and then a comfortable unanimous decision over Volkan Oezdemir at UFC Macau in November. With a couple of top 10, top 15 quality wins under his belt, he gets the marquee placement and, again, the possibility of vaulting himself into the title discussion with a win over former champ Blachowicz. He is comfortably favored to make the step up. Ulberg is minus 250, Blachowicz plus 200 coming back. Keith,
Wow.
I said wow as well, because if you are one of the not one of the bookmakers, if you are one of the early bettors who has driven that line to Ulberg as a greater than 2-1 favorite, it must be a referendum on Blachowicz. It must be saying that, okay, the gradual aging process of a guy who was fighting his best at age 39. At 42, he's fallen off to the point that he is, frankly, easy work for Ulberg. Calling Ulberg one-dimensional might be overstating it, but he is absolutely a specialist. If you think as pure a specialist as Carlos Ulberg should be a greater than 2-1 favorite over Jan Blachowicz, who has proven himself capable of blunting.
Yeah, his last fight was a split decision loss to Alex Pereira.
His last fight was a split decision loss to Alex Pereira. He fought Magomed Ankalaev
to a
split draw to a split draw that, yeah, I mean, it probably should have been a split decision loss, but even if he lost to, Ankalaev, and then
right there with the top two guys in the world.
Yeah. And 4 years ago, he turned back Israel Adesanya so badly that nobody ever talked about Adesanya moving back up to 205 pounds again after that. And what Blachowicz showed is his fundamentally sound bread and butter striking, when paired with just his excellent feel for distance and the threat of his takedowns, has been enough to at least keep him in the game against younger, rangier, more sophisticated, more athletic, harder hitting kickboxers. Like Adesanya, hell, even Alexander Rakic, Ankalaev, Pereira, all excellent strikers, naturally bigger than Blachowicz, all of them younger than Blachowicz, and he's at least been there against all of them. So for Olberg to be this big a favorite, I assume people must be thinking that the stuff that Blachowicz brought to his last 5 fights has faded to the point that he's ripe for Olberg to tee off on him. I don't know if that's the case. And Olberg as a striker, despite the fact that he's Adesanya's longtime teammate, obviously they appear to be close friends. In the cage, he comes off closer to Pereira to me. He's much more of a conventional stand in front of you kickboxer, where he doesn't run at his best like Adesanya off of just slipping everything you throw at him and then hitting you with something that doesn't look that hard from an unexpected angle that just drops you like you've been shot. It's closer to Pereira, where he's just looking to parry, roll with, mitigate enough of what you're throwing at him. It's never about not being touched, and then coming back with counters that put you down. And also just in terms of kind of size, general like shape, body composition, he's closer to Pereira. Not quite the same weapons, but I think even if Olberg wins this one, Blachowicz is going to make it ugly. It's going to be the kind of thing where Olberg wins a split decision and says all the right things about calling out the champ or calling out Pereira in a title eliminator afterwards, and just people aren't super excited about it because Blachowicz just kept the fight from getting out of second gear, to say something I think I've already said like 3 times on this show. I'm going with Olberg. Just Blachowicz's durability hasn't gotten better in the last year and a half. His gas tank can't have gotten better in the last year and a half. Yeah, give me Olberg to win the decision here. Make Blachowicz look slow. Catch him clean a few times. I could see him staggering Blachowicz, knocking him down. No finish. And again, a fight where there's no question who won, but there's just not much sizzle when Olberg calls for a title shot afterwards.
Yeah, this is a really intriguing matchup. I'm glad that you said that you expect this to be a close fight, because I thought Blachowicz was going to be the favorite, but again, I would be the worst at setting lines. Like, everyone knows that I'm always way off on these things. What do we get from Blachowicz? Like, again, he's been inactive for a while now. He's up there in age, so I mean, he likes to switch back and forth from orthodox to southpaw, though I do think he's better in the orthodox stance. He has tight inside boxing. I mean, he has that legendary left hook. I mean, he has that great Polish power. I like that he works the body. He likes to set up his shots with a lot of hand fighting. He generates so much power because he stays really compressed and he keeps his base underneath him. I've said before, he's like a light heavyweight Michael Chandler, where he's always right in the right position when he lands his shots. He can starch anybody in the division. you look at his run recently, and again, you have to go back because he's been inactive, but like good examples are Luke Rockhold, Dominic Reyes. I mean, even go back to like Corey Anderson. Again, none of those wins have aged super well. The Reyes knockout's looking a little bit better, but still, at that time, they were all good knockouts. He's got an elite kicking game, great calf kicks. I mean, he nearly beat Magomed Ankalaev with just calf kicking him. I don't think he gets enough credit for his grappling. He can grind inside. He's a really good get inside dirty boxing. He can land close shots inside. I mean, look at the knockout he did against Luke Rockhold. He's a historically underrated wrestler. I mean, you mentioned it. He defended the title against Israel Adesanya, but with just wrestling him. And again, he had a big size advantage, but he almost beat Alex Bahia, who doesn't have a big size advantage against in with wrestling. He isn't the best defensive wrestler, though. I mean, Glover Teixeira smoked him on the ground, but I mean, it's Glover Teixeira. Even that late Glover Teixeira is such a great grappler. He can kind of get subs everywhere. I mean, he's subbed Nikita Krylov, though. Again, like Glover Teixeira made him look like a white belt. More concerning, being at his age, is that he gassed a little bit against Alex Bahia, but that fight was also in like really high altitude, so that could be a bigger concern than Blachowicz. But based on the age, it could be. Ulberg, he's a really good athlete. I think your breakdown of him was really well. He's a very good striker, comfortable, relaxed. He's explosive. He's fast. He's super, super accurate. I think that's the thing about him that stands out. He lands in small spaces. He lands guys on the move. He's a bit of a sniper. Now he's technical. He likes to pick apart his opponents from range. Classic outfighter. Cuts angles right when he attacks. That's because he has strong foot movement. He's good at using his movement to kind of pull his opponents into his power shots. He works behind a high guard defense. He uses a lot of feints and hand fighting to set up his shots. He does so well with his check left hook. I mean, to go back, it's a terrible example of a fight, but Fabio Sharon, he couldn't get past his check left hook. He has big power. It's funny. He'd have more knockouts, but he doesn't. I don't want to say he doesn't take chances, but he knows he can win from the outside. He won't step into the pocket and unload big shots. He's not a guy who's willing to eat a shot, to land a shot of his own, to get like a spectacular knockout. He has a really good kicking game. He throws those mean oblique kicks. He has hard calf kicks. His ground game has improved, though. I mean, he won't really look for takedowns, but if he ends up on top of his career, he's got a good ground and pound. And he also subbed Dong Jung, which take that for what it's worth. I think this is an amazing fight. Blachowicz is so experienced and so well rounded. This is a massive step up for Ulberg, and Ulberg is such a great prospect. I mean, I know he's in his 30s, so I don't know if I should call him a prospect, but he feels like a prospect for the division. Yeah. I was torn, and then I started thinking about the time off, and I'm like, time off isn't a positive thing at 37 years old. And then I realized Blachowicz was 42, not 37, and I'm like, holy shit, he's so much older than I thought he was. So everything could fall apart for him at once. And I mean, obviously the betting lines agree with me there. I don't know if it's all going to fall apart, but I still think it's going to be a passing of the torch fight. I say Ulberg uses his speed advantage. I think he picks apart Blachowicz from range. I think Blachowicz is going to try to close the distance. I think he might have moments where he gets in close, but I think Ulberg's going to use, be able to turn off the cage a lot. I think he plays it safe. I don't think he takes a chance and steps in the pocket to land a big shot and worry about getting countered and hit with that big Polish power. So I think it's just too fast. I think Blachowicz is going to be too slow. Give me Ulberg to win a unanimous decision.
With that, we arrive at the main event of UFC London, a welterweight contest between former champ Leon Edwards and rising contender Sean Brady. Edwards, the 33-year-old Englishman, is 22-4 with one no contest overall. He is 14-3 with 1 no contest in the UFC. He's coming in off a loss. His only cage appearance of last year was in the headliner of UFC 304 in July, where he relinquished his belt to Belal Muhammad via unanimous decision. That snapped what I think was a 13 or 14 fight unbeaten streak for him that saw him rise from just another welterweight to an obvious contender to perhaps the man with the most overdue title shot in the entire promotion, to finally a champ and eventually a 2-time defending champ before running into Muhammad last summer. He would like to get back in the win column. He would like to affirm that he is a future as well as former champ. In order to do any of those things, he will need to get past Brady. 32-year-old Philadelphia native is 17-1 overall. He's 7-1 in the UFC. He's on a 2-fight winning streak since his own loss to Muhammad back about 2.5 years ago. He fought just once last year. It was in the headliner of UFC Fight Night 242 in September, where he won a unanimous decision over Gilbert Burns. Pair that with his December 2023 submission of Kelvin Gastelum, and he has back-to-back respectable wins in the division. A win over former champ Edwards would obviously mean much, much more for his resume and his spot in the title pecking order than any of his other fights. Keith, your favorite is -150, underdog plus 130. Who are they?
I think the line should be even closer than that. The favorite, they're in England. I'm going to say Leon Edwards.
Your favorite is Sean Brady. He is -150. Leon Edwards plus 130. Here's the thing. Both of these gentlemen, for one thing, there's no smoke and mirrors. Sean Brady has a loss in the UFC. He hasn't been exposed. He is 7-1 in the promotion. He is absolutely, he's
the current champion.
He lost to the current champ. Yeah. Leon Edwards has 3 losses in the UFC, and
who did he lose to?
Claudio Silva a million years ago, and then Kamaru Usman and Belal Muhammad. That's it. With a huge.
They're both guys. I mean, Usman's rise to the title, and well, I mean, it's actually pretty early for Usman, but Usman's rise to, and then Belal winning the title.
Yep, that's
yeah.
So, I love this fight. Just I love it as a fight. I can't wait to see what happens. Like
same. I think this is sorry to interrupt you. I think this is what non-title fights. This is one of the most fights I think on paper for like main event that I'm intrigued by that's currently scheduled. Like it's up there. I'm really intrigued by this fight.
Yeah, I'm super intrigued by it as well. Leon Edwards, I think, I feel as though I'm not necessarily you and me, maybe you and me, but the fan base in general was slow to get on Edwards' bandwagon because, again, not all of his fights have been fireworks. And while there are plenty of British fighters who have the kind of cockiness that just makes him a walking soundbite, Edwards really doesn't. He's, more of a kind of sincere, intense, heartfelt type guy.
Yeah.
And so slow to get on the bandwagon and perhaps a bit quick to jump off. Here's the thing.
Yeah, I agree.
Edwards' skills, like there's no indication that his loss to Muhammad was because his skills have dropped off. Just Muhammad is the man, and Muhammad is a man who it's screamingly obvious was built for 5-round fights all along. Like maybe
didn't we? I think we both. And I know I picked Muhammad. You picked Muhammad too.
Yeah,
didn't you?
I picked Muhammad too, and I picked him very confidently. I was like,
and he was an underdog, but
he was the underdog because he had been losing their first fight before it ended is probably the reason. But here's the thing, Edwards, I've been following him since he was in the UFC, but the first fight I ever covered live for Sherdog, like the first UFC top promotion level card I ever covered for Sherdog was UFC San Antonio back in 2019, where he beat Rafael dos Anjos. And I thought going into the fight that he might have been, and I definitely thought afterwards that he was the best British MMA wrestler in terms of offensive wrestling, defensive wrestling, and knowing when to employ each. Like, just kind of looking back at his fights, like, he was winning fight after fight, and it was very often by being able to dictate whether the fight took place on the feet or on the ground according to what was to his best advantage. Like, lost in his, again, 12 or 13 fight unbeaten streak. You don't win that many fights in a row in a division like the UFC welterweight division without at least a little luck. And you also don't do it without very good fight IQ. Like, you don't, like, you, there's a reason your action hero Robbie Lawler types never went out and won 10 fights in a row in the welterweight division. You can't just go out there blood and guts and win.
But there's a reason why George St. Pierre was able to defend so much.
That's you've beaten me to the comparison I was going to make, because George St. Pierre is, if you think he's the greatest wrestler in MMA history, it's not laughable. It's just down to what your criteria are. But for him, it's the same thing as Edwards, where it's offensive wrestling, defensive wrestling, and the fight IQ to employ each at the right time.
No way to do it.
George St. Pierre, just
even a guy
didn't even have any.
Sorry to interrupt you. Even a guy like Usman, we think of like this great athlete and super strong and big, but he also was extremely had great fight IQ, knew where to take fights, when to take fights, when to rest, when to lean. Like he and why was he able to be so successful such a long time in the division? It's very similar. I agree.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So like Edwards, it's the same sort of GSP thing where, not all of GSP's title defenses were very exciting to watch, and it was completely intentional. Like, he would much rather keep that belt than provide you with,
let's slug it out with Thiago Alves.
Yeah. The difference is that GSP hit that plateau after he already had the belt, so everyone had to come to him. Like, whereas Edwards was on the come up, and it was very easy for the UFC to just pass by his name. But and despite the fact that he lost to Muhammad, and while Muhammad had surprising amounts of success on the feet, it ultimately boiled down to Muhammad, his wrestling kind of coming to the forefront, his incredible pace coming to the forefront, especially later in the fight. But even aside from that, Edwards has been okay in 5-round fights. I mean, he's been in something like 6 or 7 5-round fights in the UFC that actually went past the end of the 3rd round, and he's like 6-1 in them, with the Muhammad fight being the only exception.
Yeah.
This fight for me boils down to, even after the Burns fight, I am still nervous taking Sean Brady in a 5-round fight against someone who's more proven in 5-round fights. Brady physically is very different than Edwards. He's much more of a compact, muscular, powerfully built guy.
Yeah.
He is a pretty explosive athlete. He is a good wrestler and a great top position grappler. I think those things kind of get thrown into the same ball.
Sure.
It's not quite the same. Like, he is a good offensive wrestler. And for a guy that I know he has amateur wrestling in his background, like at least as a high school standout, I have the feeling he's the guy that probably like went to a junior college on a wrestling, for wrestling, and maybe just, it didn't pan out. He didn't end up going on to the 4-year college level, but.
Well, he's from Pennsylvania, so that alone makes you a great wrestler.
Oh yeah. Like high school.
This is Dagestan of America.
It absolutely. And so, he is a good offensive wrestler. And once he has people down, like, he's a somewhat Dagestani style top position guy, but his whole thing, like his entries, the way he finishes takedowns, it's a little brute forcey. Some of his top control is a little brute forcey. Some of his mat returns. It all boils down to, he can be winning rounds and looking dominant, but he is burning as much gas as the guy on the bottom is. And it is told on him late in fights. Like, and this is not to, well, it's to pat myself on the back a little bit, which I'm entitled to do because I also come and happily admit it when I was wrong. But I picked Bilal Muhammad over him when they fought back in 2022, every day of the week and twice on Sunday, because I'm like, they're both really good wrestlers, but Muhammad tires you out and Brady tires himself out. Like, this seems really obvious to me.
Muhammad is criminally underrated.
Yes.
Still.
He's the champ. It's still underrated. Here, and I should have mentioned this off the top, Brady is actually coming in as a replacement for Jack Della Maddalena, who was promoted to a title shot. He's fighting Muhammad, in the next month or so. But these two will have had over a month to prepare for each other. I assume Brady is going to be in reasonably good shape. Sure. But that makes me even less willing to go out on a limb and be like, oh, this is the time that Brady will be the builder and the fresher guy in the 4th and 5th rounds. I don't believe that. So Brady's avenues to winning this fight are either finishing Edwards in the first 2.5 rounds, which sure, he's capable of that, but he's not been prone to doing that, and Edwards has not been prone to falling victim to that. The other option is Brady's up 3-0 at the end of the 3rd round, and Edwards is the guy with all the momentum at the end of the fight, but it's still a straight ahead 48-47. Those are possible, but I'm not banking on either. This would be a tough fight for me to invest in if it was the other way around. If Edwards was minus 150 and Brady around plus 125 or plus 130, I'd be like, ooh, that sounds about right, because Brady has routes to pull off the upset. They're not outlandish. But here, with Brady as the favorite, I'm comfortable taking Leon Edwards here. Give me Leon Edwards in the upset. Wow. And the real suspense for me is whether Brady looks as good as he did at the end of this fight as he did in the Burns fight, or the effort of just getting jabbed up and kicked by Edwards at range, and Edwards getting up over and over again after Brady takes him down or tries to take him down, if Brady's just gassed after 3 and Edwards ends up finishing him late. I'm actually going to pick that. Give me Edwards. I'm going to say he gets a 5th round TKO. 5th round submission wouldn't be out of the realm of possibility either, but it's obvious after 10 minutes that it's just a question of whether Brady has put up enough hay to make it a decision, or if it even makes it the decision. I don't think it does. Give me Edwards disrespected in the upset here.
Yeah, I mean, I love this fight, and your breakdown makes me even more excited for it. I love when top talents fight each other and at the right time, and I flip flop back and forth on their skills and everything. And some of the reasons why Leon Edwards kind of got disrespected on his run. I mean, I think about the Nate Diaz fight where he's this huge favorite and he dominates every second of the fight except for 20-second span where he just got clipped perfectly. But still, then right after, everyone forgets that he recovered and beat up Diaz the rest of the fight. I think about, he needs a 5th round Hail Mary knockout, so everyone says his knockout against Kamar Usman was a fluke, and just perfect time. And then he had to, he beats. I thought he clearly beat him in the rematch. The trilogy fight, and then he went to split decision. Things he'd have good performances and still get disrespected on his way. When I watch Leon Edwards, he's a really well-rounded fighter, as you pointed out, on the feet, southpaw, but he will fight on both stances. He switches back and forth a lot. He's a very tactical striker. He likes to use footwork to keep his defense. I said this before. His number one defense is just not being there. He's got good head movement. He understands range really well. He's a very good kickboxer. He's accurate. He sets up his shots well with feints. He draws out his opponent's attacks and then counters. He was doing that with anytime Colby Covington was coming on, he's just easily tagging him with his counters, even though he gets to the point where he just made Colby Covington really gun shy, which is kind of a little bit of a trend recently with Colby. He's also good at moving his opponents to where he wants to attack. He hits that that high kick knockout, but he also moved Kamaru Usman to that position. It wasn't just a freaking Hail Mary. It was a Hail Mary, but it was like there was technique behind it. It wasn't just like that was his. Like I think about like I always coach the kids in wrestling and we'll drill moves and I'll be like, oh, you're down 10. I need a big move. Like let's go to your Hail Mary. And like everybody has their like it could be a sag headlock, it could be a lat throw, it could be whatever it is. But that was his. Like that's his go-to. I could end the fight with one move. He's and that I don't want that to overshadow that one high kick. He's got a good kicking game anyways. I mean, he's really good at looking like he's going to kick you in the body and then flick it up to the head instead. He's good deep kicks up the middle from range. He's a guy that he does really well from range. I mean, he hates being pressured. We saw that against Bilal, but nobody likes being pressured, especially against Bilal Muhammad. If he closes the distance, he's a big welterweight. He can use his size well in the clinch. He's been in the clinch with Kamaru Usman and Colby Covington, and he's done really well. He's good knees, good elbows inside. He uses his size to clinch and look for upper body takedowns. You talk about his wrestling. He's a really good offensive wrestler. He sets up his entries well behind his striking. He used to love doing body locks, but he's got good entries too, man. He's good at like getting on the hips, turning the corner. His takedown defense was extremely solid, except for the Bilal fight. Again, I'm with you. I attribute that more to Bilal Muhammad than Leon Edwards' takedown defense is failing him or disappearing. If he gets on top, he's got good top control. He's got good ground and pound. And you mentioned going 25 minutes is not an issue. And you know what? Also being in the home crowd and like he doesn't seem the guy who like worries about the pressure. Sean Brady, is Brady gonna be able to get through like airport security while still riding Calvin Gaslam's back?
He'll have to buy a separate seat for him. Yeah.
Yeah. I've liked Brady a lot. He's like you mentioned, he's only lost to the current champion. I was on Brady when he was on the regional scene. This guy I really liked. Obviously, the loss is aged really well. He's used to be a one-dimensional grappler, and that's not the case. He's a very well-rounded fighter now. On the feet, he likes to, similar to Leon Edwards, he's switching stance a lot, constantly darting back and forth, kind of keeping his opponent guessing. He has nice, tight boxing inside. He actually seems like his hand speed has improved. And sometimes when the way hand speed improves is not that these guys suddenly became better athletes faster, it's just the technique gets better. So that's why you throw him quicker. Which obviously adds to your power, does everything together. He's got plus power. I wouldn't say he's like this big power puncher, but he can rock it. He works the body really well. He's constantly moving forward and pressuring. As far as a kicking game, great calf kicks. He's similar to Leon Edwards, where he likes to close the distance and work in the clinch. He doesn't have the size, like the height and the size of Leon Edwards, where he's grilling that way, but he has just a strength, a grip strength, working on grinding that way. He loves like a grimy. We might get a lot of that with these two guys clinching. I've described before. I call him like the white Kamaru Usman. He'll put you against the cage, pin you back against the cage, and then just batter you with strikes and slicing elbows. He can, from that area, drop down, to the hips and just overpower his opponent to get the fight to the canvas. But from the outside, he can strike and then follow his strikes into entries. He's a good wrestler. I love his reactionary double if his opponent kind of presses him back. His wrestling, I do think is slightly overrated. I don't think he's that well at chain wrestling. I think that's why he struggled to get Bilal Muhammad down. But again, Bilal Muhammad's the man, and he dominated both these guys because he's the man. If Brady gets the fight to the ground, he's a very good grappler.
Yes.
Like I said, his wrestling is overrated, but his grappling isn't. Smother and top control. He's got mean ground pound. He's a BJJ black belt, but he's a different BJJ black belt. Like we throw that like that name that word is like means nothing to me, you know. But the way he fights, I mean, Paul Felder is constantly talking about his great guillotine. We've seen him locking guillotines, but he also has fantastic back takes. I mean, he took Michael Chiesa's back a bunch of times in a fight where he was gassing and still took his back. I mean, we joked about Kelvin Gastelum. Like, he was like Kelvin Gastelum's back the entire fight. He's got 5 subs on his record. He subbed Jake Matthews. He subbed Christian Aguilar. He subbed Kelvin Gastelum.
You know what? He's a black belt, but he's clearly a guy that went from white to black belt in an MMA gym. Like, he doesn't have...
Yeah.
He's not like the guy that didn't start doing MMA until he was already like a purple or brown belt. Had to unlearn things. Like, everything he does is MMA effective.
MMA effective. That's a good breakdown. He's not like going for scarf holds. He's just he's got his go-to. He's got great back takes. He's really good. He showed that he hated the pressure from Muhammad. But again, like we talked about, Muhammad does that to everyone. Cardio is the question mark. I will say this: cardio has drastically improved than when he first was, not first in the UFC, but like first becoming like known in the rankings, Michael Chiesa, those kind of like that range when he was fighting guys, where cardio has actually kind of become a strength now of his. As far as prediction goes, I mean, this is a great fight. I think for Edwards, going from Della Maddalena to Brady is actually much harder fight. Not that they're like Brady's so much better than Maddalena. I just mean the way they fight is stylistically tougher. Della Maddalena's would want to strike with him, or Brady's going to want to strike and grapple and test his cardio and just grimy fight. I've flip-flopped a lot because I like both guys so much. Edwards is more technically sound on the feet, while Brady is as weird as I say, he might be the more well-rounded. Well, no, I shouldn't say that. They're both super well-rounded, but he definitely has the pressure on his side. So before you hit record for this fight, I said to you, I'm like, man, I was wondering about the odds, who was going to be the favorite. And then I also said, I think we're going to pick differently on this fight. Well, we don't have a consensus on underdog pick.
Do not have a consensus underdog pick.
But one thing we always do is we never let our listeners down. They want a consensus underdog pick, and I'm not picking against Leon Edwards in England. I think he bounces back. I think we get a war. I think Brady has understood how to pressure, but still not overexert himself. So I don't think he's going to hit the wall as much as you might. Mm-hmm. I think it's going to be very close. I think because of the pressure, he's not going to get this long grappling. I think he might lose. I think when you talked about him winning early and then kind of fading late, I don't know if it's going to be that. I think it's going to be what he needs to do to win will gas him out, and that is to get Edwards down, get to his legs. I think Edwards knows that. I think he's going to focus so much more on his defensive wrestling, maybe forcing Brady back to using his teep kicks, doing stuff like that on the feet. It's going to be really close, but I think Leon Edwards wins. So give me Leon Edwards. I'm going to say super close. I'll say a split decision. All
right. There is your lone consensus upset pick for UFC Fight Night 255. And that is it. The Sherdog Radio Network preview for UFC Fight Night 255, Edwards versus Brady, also known as UFC London. I've been Ben, he has been Keith. If this is one of your first times watching or listening to our preview, first of all, thank you. We hope you enjoyed it. We do our best to bring you a mix of in-depth analysis and occasional humorous or historic asides that we think is pretty unique in this space. Please do like, subscribe, hit that button. None of those things cost you a thing. They make our bosses happy. They allow us to keep bringing you this content free of charge. Please do drop us a comment. Keith and I both man the comment section. If you think we left some value on the table in terms of upsets, let us know. If you think we picked some upsets that are unwarranted, let us know. Because if you're right and we're wrong, we will give you your flowers on the recap. You just need to come collect them. That recap will be early to mid-evening this Saturday, but we are live on the Sherdog YouTube page right after the main event. Keith takes the captain's chair. We'll talk about all 13 of these fights in reverse order from the main event all the way down to the curtain jerker, talking about what was good, what was bad, what was surprising, what was controversial. There's always something. Talking about what's next for some of the notable winners as well as losers, and talking with you. The live chat is open that whole time, so we are taking your questions, your comments, and your hot takes in real time. We have a growing community of friends that hang out with us after the fights, and we would love for you to be part of it. Between now and then, thank you once again for listening. Enjoy the rest of your week. If you live in the U.S. or if you live in Ireland and you're the type to get into it, happy St. Paddy's Day. And by all means, enjoy these fights.